Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills, commons. Consideration at report stage of Bill C-44, Helping Families in Need Act.
There being no motions at report stage, the House will now proceed without debate to the putting of the question on the motion to concur in the bill at report stage. Mr. Flaherty for Ms. Finlay, seconded by Mr. O'Connor, moves that Bill C-44, an act to amend the Canada Labour Code and the Employment Insurance Act and to make consequential amendments to the Income Tax Act and the Income Tax Regulations, be concurred in at report stage. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes. Agreed? Agreed. So ordered. When shall the bill be read a third time? Now. Mr. Flaherty for Ms. Finlay, seconded by Mr. O'Connor, moves that Bill C-44, an act to amend the Canada Labour Code and the Employment Insurance Act and to make consequential amendments to the Income Tax Act and the Income Tax Regulations, be now read a third time and do pass. Debate. The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to rise in the House today and speak about this absolutely fantastic piece of legislation. The Helping Families in Need Act is a bill that will provide help to parents who are going through some of the most difficult times in their lives. Mr. Speaker, as a new member of Parliament, I very much remember one of the first constituent meetings that I had after being elected. And I had the father of a very young girl who was very stricken with cancer indicate to me, because we as a political party had made a promise in that election campaign that we would bring in changes to the employment insurance system that would allow parents of critically ill children to claim benefits while they were spending much needed time with their child. And I remember him coming in and talking to me and sharing his story and saying how much of a benefit it would have been in their case with his wife if she'd been able to take the time off work and claim EI benefits to be able to stay with their very sick child. I'm delighted to report that the child has had a great recovery. She is doing well. But this is just an example, Mr. Speaker, of one family out of thousands that these changes proposed in Bill C-44 will help. And as one individual member of Parliament, to hear that story and to be able to rise in the House today and talk about that and know that this bill will make a significant difference to families like that makes me immensely proud. The proposed legislation, Mr. Speaker, supports the implementation of 3 initiatives. The new federal income support for parents of murdered or missing children, the new employment insurance benefit for parents of critically ill children, and enhanced access to EI sickness benefits for parents who fall ill while they are receiving EI parental benefits. Mr. Speaker, the title of this bill says it all. It is about helping Canadian families. It is about supporting them through situations that are both financially and emotionally difficult. As announced by the Prime Minister earlier this spring, we will be creating a new benefit for the parents of murdered or missing children. Mr. Speaker, we heard at committee from a number of parents whose lives had been affected by the fact that their child was missing, had been missing, and in some cases had been murdered. I can't even imagine as a parent going through that. But listening and hearing the testimony and hearing from these parents indicating how much this benefit would have helped them in their situation, that even though they continue to grieve, and they will each and every day for that murdered child, the ability to take time off, to spend time with the remaining members of the family, to have that level of support, to know that their job is secure and safe through the amendments that are proposed in this bill to the Canada Labour Code, will make a significant difference to the lives of those people who showed the courage to come before the Human Resources, Skills and Social Development Committee and share their story with all of us. And I know every member of the committee, both opposition and government members, were very much moved by the testimony of those individuals. As a father, Mr. Speaker, of 2 wonderful daughters, I understand how important family is, and a parent's desire to protect our children. The loss or disappearance of a child as a result of a criminal act can only be described as the most difficult experience I think a parent could ever go through. The new federal income support for parents of murdered or missing children, which will provide parents with financial support of up to $350 per week for up to 35 weeks, is a major step forward. I'm delighted, Mr. Speaker, that all members of the committee at report stage recommended the bill come back here today for further and final debate and hopefully passage, because we all recognize the tremendous benefit that this support will provide to these families. The Helping Families in Need Act will also amend the Canada Labour Code to protect the jobs of parents who temporarily leave a federally regulated job to cope with the death or disappearance of a child as a result of a suspected criminal code offense. We know that the new income support and the knowledge that their job is also protected will help ease the pressure on parents in this unimaginable situation. Since Canadians first elected a Conservative government, Mr. Speaker, we have been devoted in our support for victims of crime. Despite the opposition parties who continually vote against our measures to strengthen victims' rights. But this bill does transcend party politics. It provides support for Canadians going through something that is so personal and so devastating and so profound that only those who have been touched by this tragedy themselves will ever truly understand it. We have already heard a number of very touching speeches in this House, Mr. Speaker, by many members of Parliament, including the Member of Parliament for Brant. And I want to thank him for what I think was a very moving speech, and to share his personal story, his family's personal story yesterday in the House on this bill. And it just goes to show you, Mr. Speaker, there's 308 people that get elected to this place, and we all come from different parts of the country and different families and so on, and many of us wind up being touched on a personal level by some of these tragedies in life. We know of a relative with a critically ill child. We know of a family where a child has gone missing, and unfortunately there are some of us who also do know families who have been touched by the fact that a child has been murdered. But I am glad to hear that my honourable colleagues from the Liberal and NDP parties will be supporting this bill, even though the NDP initially did vote against the Ways and Means motion to get this bill moving. But, Mr. Speaker, let me review some of the measures we've taken to help families, many of these despite the opposition parties that either opposed or delayed many of the great initiatives that we have been doing. You know, Mr. Speaker, our government has expanded the eligibility for compassionate care benefits to include people considered as family by the person who is ill. We've allowed self-employed workers to opt into the employment insurance program to be able to receive maternity, parental, sickness, and compassionate care benefits. And I do know, in speaking to a number of self-employed people, Mr. Speaker, in my riding of Mississauga-Streetsville, how much they very much appreciate the fact that they can opt in to the EI system, because, especially for women entrepreneurs, because they will then be eligible for maternity and parental leave benefits while they are caring for their newborn at a time when they may not be able to continue to directly run their own business. We've also improved access to EI parental benefits for military families and for foster families who make a demonstrable commitment to adopt the child in their care. And, Mr. Speaker, I know as a former board member of the Peel Children's Aid Society how important that initiative was for foster families to be able to spend the time they need with a new child they've adopted into their family, and to be eligible to collect EI benefits just as if it was their own biological newborn child into the family. What a great initiative that we brought on to encourage more families to foster and to adopt children who need a wonderful home. You know, our government is committed to making targeted, common-sense changes to the EI program to support hard-working Canadian families. And, Mr. Speaker, we are doing just that through the Helping Families in Need Act. This support will help people at a time when they most desperately need it. While we are fortunate to live in one of the safest countries in the world, we are not immune to violence. You know, Mr. Speaker, every year, and it's unthinkable, but every year in Canada, some 1,100 children are reported abducted, and about 100 children are murdered. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what it might be like to lose someone you love more than anything in the world, and especially in something as senseless as a child abduction or a murder. It is unthinkable, and families that have to deal with that reality deserve our support. But our government is taking steps to help families that are dealing with these traumas. We've heard from Canadians that this help is needed, and it's long overdue. And that is why our government made the campaign commitment to providing this support, and I'm delighted to say that we are following through on it right now. This income support will help these parents take time off work to address legal issues and to begin their emotional recovery. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, many employers grant unpaid leave to parents in these situations, and I think there would be very, very few employers that wouldn't empathize with their employee and his or her family going through this. And those companies are often very generous in their support. But it's important we as legislators also make sure that we're doing what we need to do within the laws of Canada and within our employment insurance system to also provide our supports. Fortunately, while it helps parents focus on their families, most parents cannot afford to go without an income for extended periods of time. They also need to know that their job will still be there when they are ready to come back. Mr. Speaker, we are the one party that is always putting the rights of victims ahead of criminals, and our record has been very clear on this issue. In 2007, we provided $52 million to strengthen the federal victim strategy. And in budget 2011, there was an additional $26 million for this initiative. Since Canadians elected our government, we have brought in much needed legislation to protect the victims of crime, as well as to ensure that those who do commit crimes pay the price. And we will continue to deliver on our commitment to protecting all Canadians. As a parent of two daughters, 13 and 8, the thought of losing one of them would be unimaginable. And we do talk to families who have been through that situation, Mr. Speaker, and all members of this House empathize with what they are going through. We as a government, however horrible the circumstances, have an obligation to support and help families to cope during these tragedies. By providing this much-needed financial support and job protection for parents, we can at least give them some time to begin to heal. Mr. Speaker, I want to read some of the quotes of a number of different representatives and organizations who are supportive of this bill and want to see its speedy passage. I'd like to start with Dan Demers from the Canadian Cancer Society. And he says, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "This new EI support will allow parents to focus on caring for their child rather than worrying about how to pay the bills, and they can keep their jobs. These programs will strengthen Canadian families and provide them the flexibility and the security they need to help keep their lives as normal as possible through a very difficult time." End quote. Terry Ordonil, the Executive Director of the Comox Valley Hospice Society says, and I quote, "By extending these benefits, we can ensure that parents can focus on caring for their child during this difficult time, rather than worrying about financial issues." Sharon Ruth, who is the mother of a critically ill child, in a press conference this past September said, and I quote, "Every time there was an election, all the efforts died on the order paper and we had to start again. The truth is that I had help from each party, but it wasn't until our country finally got a majority government that I'm standing here today with all of you on the brink of what I hope will be revolutionary change to help those families that are in need and most vulnerable." I'll quote Sharon Ruth again because, she speaks very passionately about where we are and where we need to go. And she says, "I want to thank the minister who has a genuine concern for families and their suffering, for receiving myself and Colleen and Edwina Eddy last November and to listening to what we had to say. She believed that changes needed to be made and worked toward making this day happen." And in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to go back again to that one of the first face-to-face constituency meetings I had with a resident of the great riding of Mississauga Streetsville, the father who came in and shared his story with me. And he said, "Brad, you guys need to keep your election commitment. You need to get this measure enacted." Mr. Speaker, nothing gives me greater honor and privilege today than to stand in this House, to speak to Bill C-44, and to say to that father, we have delivered. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for his presentation today on Bill C-44 as well as his work on committee. We sat on HoC together and reviewed this bill in some detail. I noticed that he couldn't resist taking some partisan jabs, and I'll try not to reply in kind, but I do want to point out he ended by suggesting that his party has kept its commitment with respect to the electoral platform, where indeed they did promise in 2011, quote, "to provide enhanced EI benefits to parents of murdered or missing children and parents of gravely ill children." We on this side of the House, of course, support that commitment and will be voting in favour of Bill C-44. What he neglects to also say is that their commitment also said, quote, "funding for this measure will come from general revenue, not EI premiums." That is part of the commitment that they did not keep. Now, we know from other debates in this House that the EI system is not serving Canadians well. Only 4 out of 10 Canadians can access EI. We know that successive Liberal and Conservative governments have stolen $57 billion out of the EI fund to pay down the debt and deficit, rather than providing the much-needed benefits for people who, frankly, have paid into the system, which is only workers and employers. Now we have an about-face. We're adding something else to the EI fund, to the draw on the EI fund, rather, and that is that we now have to pay for this bill out of the EI fund as well. And I wonder if the member could just talk for a minute about why the Conservatives flip-flopped on their commitment that this program would not be funded by EI.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga Streetsville.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to thank the Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain. We all party members at the Human Resources Committee have worked very hard in reviewing this bill, and I want to express my thanks on behalf of our government to the opposition parties for their support of this bill. They may have raised some issues where they believe some changes would be appropriate. We listened. We do believe that this is the right way to go. We believe, based on the best information that we are getting from the very professional and hardworking bureaucrats within the ministry, that this is the right way to go. That part of the benefits in this bill will be paid through the EI fund, and part of the benefits for missing and murdered children would be paid out of General Revenue Fund. That is consistent with the compassionate care and sick leave benefits that we have in the EI system presently. And one of the things I didn't get a chance to mention in my speech, Mr. Speaker, which did come up at committee, was the reason for the 37 weeks of the entitlement under critically ill and whether it should be longer. Well, in fact, it can be longer because a family can claim the 37 weeks plus the 15 weeks for a sick benefit plus 6 weeks for compassionate care leave. That's a tremendous amount of time for a family to claim those benefits, especially when they're workers who have already paid into the EI fund.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Party, too, is going to be supporting this bill. This is something in which we've recognized in terms of being a very important issue. We care about our children. We want to be able to be there in a very real and tangible way, and it's one of the reasons why we are supporting this bill. And we have talked about in the past, through electoral elections, about expanding to look at, for example, gravely ill parents or a sibling, and how employment insurance might be able to assist them. And, Mr. Speaker, I think that at the end of the day, that the government does have an obligation to apply that compassion and that caring attitude for those individuals also. And we hope the government will, in fact, act on that. But with this particular piece of legislation, there will be an obligation to do some discussions and carry on discussions and dialogue with provincial jurisdictions. There has been a great deal of concern, many would argue, in regards to the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, and I'm wondering if the member might want to provide some comment in regards to how he believes that particular minister needs to play a strong role in working with the provinces so that, in fact, we're going to realize the maximum benefits of this particular piece of legislation.
The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague, and I want to thank the members of the Liberal Party as well for indicating that they will be supporting this bill. And I do want to thank the honourable member for Cape Breton-Canso, who is the Liberal Party member on the committee. He, too, just like the member for Hamilton Mountain, have worked very hard on this bill and reviewing it at committee and making sure that it is a strong bill to go forward and to make sure that it will indeed help families. I think it would be the role for all members of Parliament after this bill is passed to have conversations with our respective provincial colleagues to get them to adopt similar labour code changes in their provincial labour bills, labour legislation in each of the provinces to mirror the changes that we are bringing forward to the Canada Labour Code, to make sure that the 90% of the people in this country that are not covered under the Canada Labour Code but are covered by employment standards and labour legislation in the provinces also will be able to get the benefit that federally regulated businesses and federal government employees will get through the changes in Bill C-44 with respect to the Canada Labour Code.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Don Valley West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Families in Need Act is clearly a compassionate act that is long overdue, and I'm delighted to be in the House today to hear members of all parties agree that they are in support of this compassionate and necessary legislation. Mr. Speaker, as a parent 3 times and a grandparent of 4 little ones, I cannot imagine the stress on a family when confronted with a missing or a murdered child. We've all been touched in this House. I doubt anybody hasn't been touched by someone who's lost a child, and we've seen the grief and the difficulties the families face. So this act, I think, addresses important needs to take certain issues off the table so that families can focus on the stress at hand of dealing with a missing or murdered child and the grief that goes with it. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend my colleague for his speech this morning. I felt he addressed the issues very, very well and obviously with great compassion. And I'd like him to just perhaps go a little deeper on the issue surrounding, certainly we've talked about the job security, but I wonder if he could just address the federal income support in a little greater depth. something that I think is very important in helping families to deal with these issues at such a time as they're being confronted with.
The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Well, I want to thank my colleague very much from Don Valley West for his support as well of this legislation. And I'm not at the grandparent level yet, but I see the joy in my parents and my in-laws' eyes when they are interacting with my daughters, and hopefully my day will come when I can enjoy grandchildren as well. But the member asked a specific question about the federal income support for parents of murdered or missing children, and beginning on January 1st, 2013, this new grant will provide $350 per week, up to 35 weeks to parents of murdered or missing children, if they're less than 18 years of age, whose death or disappearance is the result of a suspected criminal code offense. To receive this taxable grant, the affected parents will need to have earned a minimum level of income in the previous calendar year of $6,500 and take leave from their employment. Again, this is a support mechanism for families that is not directly related to the EI fund, but is related to another benefit, to recognize the fact that in the case of missing and murdered children, that it is different, and it is, in a lot of cases, finite. It's done because the child has been murdered, and the family needs the support mechanisms and the longer time to deal with that particular issue. So this is a major step forward, Mr. Speaker, for these families that need and require this level of support.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in the House again to continue the debate on Bill C-44, an act to amend the Canada Labour Code and the Employment Insurance Act, and to make consequential amendments to the Income Tax Act and the Income Tax Regulations. Although the title itself doesn't tell us much, this bill makes a series of improvements, most of them through the Employment Insurance Program, to Canadian families who desperately need the support of their government. For that reason, as I indicated at second reading, my NDP colleagues and I are pleased to support this bill. But we take our role as the official opposition seriously. We hold the government to account, and even when we agree with the intent of a particular piece of government legislation, we will work hard to make sure that it's the very best bill that it can be. To that end, we went into the committee hearings on Bill C-44 hoping to make the process work. Committee is where we have the opportunity to go through a bill clause by clause, to question the minister, or in this case ministers, responsible for the bill, and to hear testimony from both experts in the field and from individuals who will be impacted by the proposed legislative changes. We then go through the bill with a fine-tooth comb to address concerns because, with this government in particular, the devil is often in the details. Because we support Bill C-44, we went into committee hoping that a spirit of cooperation would prevail and that we would collaborate to make the necessary improvements to give parents of critically ill, murdered or missing children the support they so desperately need. Mr. Speaker, I can't tell you how profoundly disappointed I was when the government members on committee reverted to the old caricature of themselves and refused to entertain a single amendment proposed by opposition MPs. Honestly, it was a disgrace. Let me give you just one example of an area where I think we could have made an important improvement to the bill. In order for parents of murdered or missing children to receive a government grant, they must have earned $6,500. Presumably, that threshold was set to show some kind of attachment to the labour force. Leaving aside the broader question of whether it's necessary to prove such attachment in the first place, I asked the Minister of Human Resources in committee why she chose to adopt a threshold based on earnings as opposed to hours worked. Obviously, under her rules, somebody who is working for minimum wage has to work many more hours to qualify for the benefit than somebody who is making, say, $150 an hour. Why would we create such an unequal threshold when people at the lower end of the wage scale will likely need the financial support even more than those at the higher end? I encouraged the Minister to explore other ways of proving attachment to the labour force. The Minister responded by saying that they could not use hours worked to prove attachment to the labour force because, and I quote, that would not be compatible with the eligibility of self-employed workers who have opted into the EI system. Their eligibility for EI special benefits is based on financial figures, on dollars earned, because we cannot measure their hours. There's no way to validate that." End of quote. Really? We don't trust the self-employed to report accurately, so we're going to punish those workers who earn minimum wage or work part-time because the government can't create a nuanced enough system to make sure that the bill is fair to everyone. Really, Mr. Speaker? Is that what the government is saying to parents of murdered and missing children? We in the opposition couldn't move the necessary amendments in committee because they would have been ruled out of order. But the minister had, and indeed still has, the opportunity to right this wrong. Changing the eligibility criteria is the right thing to do, and it is not going to throw the government into financial crisis. Let's be clear about the numbers here. According to the Canadian Police Information Centre, there were 25 abductions by strangers in 2012. Helping 25 families is not going to break the bank. But even if it did, it is absolutely the right thing to do, and the minister should not be creating artificial barriers by means testing eligibility for support. Frankly, the Conservatives' failure to reconsider these provisions is an absolute disgrace and belies the spin that they are sincere about wanting to help families in crisis. I would say the same thing about the other amendments my NDP colleagues and I were pushing for in committee. I know I won't have time to repeat them all here in the House today, but let me continue to highlight some of the most obvious areas where we could and should have found common cause. Let me begin with the most egregious example, Mr. Speaker, where the Conservatives' strict adherence to talking points trumped common sense. Clause 5 of Bill C-44 states that leave for critical illness will end on the last day of the week that the child dies. New Democrats tried to move a modest amendment that would have extended that leave for another 2 weeks after the child's death to give the parents time to grieve and to bury their child. Our proposed amendment was supported by the Canadian Association of Social Workers, Ronald McDonald House Charities, the Canadian Association for Community Living, and the Canadian Labour Congress. Fred Phelps, the Executive General of the Canadian Association of Social Workers, was almost incredulous when he asked the committee, would compassion not dictate that families require time after death to mourn and bury their child? For most Canadians, the answer would have been a resounding yes. But sadly, compassion does not appear to be this government's forte, and the bill is proceeding unamended. Let me give you another example, Mr. Speaker. The bill as it currently stands defines children as those under 18 years of age. Why is that? In many cases, children are defined not by age, but by their dependency on their parents. So, for example, many dental and health insurance plans cover so-called, quote, children until they reach the age of 18 or they complete school. 18 is not a hard and fast cutoff. I would argue that this should be the case in Bill C-44 as well. Particularly, I think it's essential that the definition of child be expanded beyond the age at 18 for disabled children. As the minister herself acknowledged, the criteria she used were emotional dependency and emotional maturity. Clearly, those criteria would apply to some disabled Canadians who may well be over the age of 18, but for whom the emotional attachment to their parents is every bit as real as for those children who fit the current definition of the Act. As Tyler Natuk, representing the Canadian Association for Community Living, made clear at committee, quote, caregiving responsibilities for parents of children with disabilities often continue much longer in life than for other families. And so certainly I want to recognize the need and the duties that carry on throughout a lifetime. The parenting of a child with a severe disability is a lifetime commitment, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, it would have been easy for us to allow for the expansion of the definition of the word child in this bill. That's why the New Democrats on the committee moved an amendment that would add child to the list of terms that could be defined through regulations, which would allow the government to expand the definition to include dependent children over the age of 18. Again, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about a very small number of families who would be impacted. But for those families, the concern is very real. And it's not good enough for the Conservatives to vote no just because the amendment came from the NDP. The Conservatives should have put partisanship aside and acted in the best interest of Canadians. That's what they were elected to do. But if they can't even do it on a bill that has all party support, how are we ever going to make the committee process work on the more contentious matters that are referred to our committee? Is it really that foreign a concept to this government that detailed scrutiny of their bills may actually lead to better legislation? Committee work used to be an integral part of the legislative process under governments of all stripes, but under this Conservative Prime Minister, that work is wholly devalued. Here's another example. Clause 6 of the bill provides leave for the parents of murdered or missing children. We all support that provision, of course. But wouldn't it make sense to allow parents to take that leave on a flexible basis rather than mandating that it be taken in consecutive weeks? We weren't suggesting that the total number of weeks be increased. We simply wanted to allow parents to apportion their leave to suit their personal circumstances. Oftentimes, their dealings with the judicial system occurred months down the road. Why would we not allow them to use some of their leave time during that critical time? Again, Mr. Speaker, that flexibility found broad support among the witnesses who gave testimony before our committee. Let me give you a sampling from the very people whom this bill is intended to help. When asked whether it would be helpful to create flexibility with respect to the leave provisions of the bill, here's what they said. Mr. Bruno Serra, whose daughter Brigitte was murdered in January of 2006 at the age of 17 during her shift at a gas station in Montreal, said, "I think that would be a very good thing. For example, if this happened to someone and after 10 weeks they felt ready, they could return to work. In my case, I went back after 5 weeks, but I wasn't really capable. So it would help to have hours or weeks banked. 5 probably would have been used, and then there would be 30 left, which could be used over the years. But there should be no expiry date. For example, it could be decided that the recipient would have 1 year to use these 35 weeks, as is sometimes the case in the government. Instead, this should be spread out over 2 or 3 years. Some trials can take place 3 years later. If someone has used all the weeks and the trial comes up, that person will relive the tragedy. When the trial comes up, you relive the day when you learned about the death of your loved one. So there are other steps to take. If the person doesn't have any weeks left, he or she will have to go through the same situation again that happened at the very start. That person will be lost and unable to work. Being able to bank the weeks for later would be a very good solution." End of quote. Christiane Surratt concurred. Ms. Surratt's son was kidnapped on November 1st, 1984, when he was 8 years old. When asked about the desirability of creating greater flexibility, she said, "My answer is yes, without hesitation." I support what Mr. Sayre said. There should be banked hours should a person need them. This doesn't apply for me. I haven't found my son, but I can put myself in the shoes of people who have found their child. I do not dream about finding him alive after 28 years, you can be sure. But I understand. I am suspended. What will happen when I find his little 8-year-old body, or what's left of it? This will happen one day for sure. I will relive 28 years stored up in my memory. It is important to be prepared for this, that is certain. That is why it is crucial that these victims have a minimum amount of financial assistance to help them survive. Because listen carefully, you don't really live with this, but you survive. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, let me add the words of Ms. Celine Ott, whose life changed forever when her daughter was murdered. Here's what Ms. Ott told us in committee. For 10 to 17 years after the events, I had to deal with the perpetrator's parole requests and the issue of halfway houses. To contest these requests, you need to put together a file. This takes signatures from people in the village where he lived. This isn't easy to do. You also have to read about everything he did in prison. This isn't easy. You cannot talk to him. That's not what I wanted to do anyway. You have to read the reports. He never followed the recommendations. Each time, it put me right back into the situation I had gone through. Clearly, there is widespread agreement that every circumstance is different and that there must be enough flexibility to allow for accommodation. That is certainly the conclusion drawn by Canada's Ombudsman for Victims of Crime, who in her testimony also encouraged the government to allow for flexibility. She focused particularly on the administration of justice and the court process. We know that if there is a murder, the court case may be several years down the road. So to provide an option and some flexibility, for example, a parent may choose to take a certain amount of time at the time of the crime, and then, if the criminal court process is 2 years down the road, they may need to have time then as well. Also, in some cases, the person responsible may not be apprehended for a while. I'm just saying adding that flexibility would provide parents of murdered and missing children an opportunity to take the time when it's appropriate for them, when they need the time. Clearly, there was broad-based consensus about what needed to be done to make Bill C-44 as effective as possible for the people it was intended to help. The only people offside were the members of the Conservative caucus, presumably at the direction of the minister responsible and the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I make these points more in sadness than in anger. We had the perfect opportunity to improve a bill that we all agree is worth supporting. This did not need to be an exercise in rigid partisanship where the Conservative members of the committee automatically oppose anything proposed by the NDP. Frankly, the victims of crime deserve better. The parents of critically ill children deserve better, and the Canadian public deserves better. They deserve a concerted effort from all their elected officials to make Parliament work. And in this instance, on Bill C-44, the Conservative members on the HoC Committee let Canadians down. Now, at this point, Mr. Speaker, you may well wonder whether we will continue to support this bill. Let me reassure you, my NDP colleagues and I will, of course, vote in favour of Bill C-44. My point is simply that we could have achieved more, that we could have improved the bill in meaningful ways, but that we failed to seize that important opportunity. But that doesn't mean that baby steps in the right direction aren't worth taking. In fact, as I said at the time of second reading, there are parts of Bill C-44 that were lifted directly from my own private member's bill, C-362. Let me just review which those are. First, one of the proposals included in the government's bill will amend the EI Act to allow mothers and fathers currently on parental leave to access EI sickness benefits if they fall ill during their parental leave. This is a welcome and long overdue amendment. I think there are few Canadians who would disagree that new parents who are very often already stretched, both physically and financially, should not be penalised if they become ill while on parental leave. I am a little puzzled, though, as to why the minister would have stopped short of extending this benefit further. If she appreciates the injustice of denying sickness benefits to those whose circumstances change while on parental leave, then why did she fail to apply the same consideration and logic to workers who are laid off while on parental leave? Why would you solve one injustice and at the same time willfully ignore the other? My bill does take that extra step. It would fix that wrong. It recognizes that those on parental leave, the very same physically and emotionally drained new parents who sometimes become ill while on parental leave, can, through no fault of their own, find that they have been downsized or laid off while on parental leave. As it currently stands, parents in that situation are denied benefits, and inexplicably, the government is content to leave them twisting in the wind, unsupported by even the meagre support provided by EI. On the upside, my private member's bill also includes provisions to cover the self-employed in this benefit arrangement, and I'm pleased to see that the government has at least adopted that. I do want to reflect for a moment, though, on whether the EI program is the best vehicle for delivering the larger package of supports contemplated by Bill C-44. As you can tell from my phrasing, Mr. Speaker, I obviously don't think that it is. And it bears pointing out that at one time the government agreed with me. As recently as 2011, the Conservative Party platform read that, quote, funding for this measure will come from general revenue, not EI premiums. And the Conservatives were right to adopt that approach. Whether you're a waged worker, a senior manager, a professional, or a stay-at-home parent, the devastation of a critically ill child is the same. I think all Canadians who find themselves caring for their seriously ill child are incurring a myriad of expenses that go beyond lost wages, and they all deserve our support. So what happened to make the government change its mind? The grant for parents of murdered and missing children will be paid from general revenues and not through EI, but with respect to critically ill children, the Conservatives have ignored their election promise and are paying for their commitment through EI. And I don't need to remind anyone in this House that the EI fund is not the government's money. It is a fund to which only workers and employers contribute. So for the government to draw on that pool of money to create a photo op on a policy announcement, no matter how positive, is surely beyond the pale. Mr. Speaker, I know my time is almost up, but indulge me for just one more minute so that I can make a final point. New Democrats support this bill. It's not a question of ideology or partisan politics. It's about assisting families in their time of need. But let's be clear, this bill does not go far enough to help the families of missing and murdered children, nor the parents of kids who are critically ill. And the bill does not go far enough in making reforms to EI. In fact, these measures completely fail to address the greatest challenges with EI, which is the lack of access for unemployed Canadians. This bill will clearly pass, and by all means, let's do it quickly, because we have to get on with tackling the larger question of comprehensive EI reform. We must make EI accessible and effective for all Canadians. Nothing less will do. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for her speech and for the indication that her party will be indeed supporting this bill. Mr. Speaker, one of the most rewarding opportunities I've had since my time of being elected here to Parliament almost 7 years ago was to co-chair, along with her colleague from Windsor-Tecumseh, the Parliamentary Committee on Palliative and Compassionate Care. And we had the opportunity to go across Canada and listen to dozens of witnesses who gave input on the issue of palliative care. And one of the issues was dealing with gravely ill children. I'd just like to read an excerpt from Sharon Ruth, who was referring to her daughter, Colleen Ruth. Quote, "Governments must support and invest in families during these tragically difficult times. The long-term socioeconomic benefits and returns of supporting families are far greater than the supposed cost savings that result from politics of inertia. Doing nothing simply raises the toll of broken individuals and families. Colleen is living proof that there are gaps in our social support system that need to be updated. I am asking you to extend compassionate leave benefits to at least 26 weeks in a 52-week period. I'm also asking that you change the qualifying criteria to gravely ill as opposed to significant risk of death." And she goes on. Mr. Speaker, I'm just asking my colleague, is rather than focusing on some of the things that, yes, we could improve, could she just for a minute acknowledge that the 35-week benefit is much better than the 26 weeks that many were asking for? And indeed, not only is it 35 weeks, but my colleague from Mississauga-Streetsville pointed out many other positive initiatives. I wondered if she could acknowledge that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and want to acknowledge my colleague's work with respect to the issues that he was working on with the Palliative Care Caucus. And of course, I agree that baby steps are better than no steps. That, to me, is a given. But I do want to take our responsibility here as parliamentarians seriously. There's a reason why we refer bills to committee after second reading. Second reading simply suggests that we've agreed to a bill in principle. We then send it to committee so we can do the hard work, so that we can listen to expert testimony, that we can learn from people's individual experiences about how we can make legislation the very best that it could possibly be, so that we're actually serving the people whom it's intended to help. We did that in the committee. We heard very moving testimony. It took incredible strength for some of the witnesses to share those personal stories with us. And all I was suggesting, Mr. Speaker, is that we didn't do them justice. The changes that they were asking for weren't of a huge magnitude. They weren't very costly. I mean, let's be clear. There aren't that many children in Canada who in any given year are murdered or who go missing. But for the families who are impacted, their lives change forever. And they were looking to their government and to our committee to help them find the support that they so desperately need. I think we had that opportunity in committee, and I think we let those families down. And so I don't think we should be proud about the work that our committee accomplished in this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Cape Breton-Canso.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to speak and ask a question of my colleague whose speech here today, I think, did an excellent job in summarizing the ascent of this bill and where we are today, and the opportunity, maybe an opportunity missed, and know fully that the spirit of the bill, the intent of the bill, the Liberal Party supports wholeheartedly, but there were some opportunities that were missed along the way. I just want to get her comments. I know we don't have much time here, but Stephen Morrow, the lawyer that represented Natalia Rojas, the case that was presented to the Supreme Court and was ruled on. One thing that was brought out during the debate was about stacking provisions, but obviously the court ruling in 2011 said that those provisions, being able to receive maternity leave and then a sick leave, those provisions were already in legislation as intended by parliamentarians who passed the law in 2002. I'd just like her comments on Mr. Morrow's testimony during the hearings.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain, a short answer, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and that's absolutely what Mr. Morrow said in committee. I do want to point out that what Mr. Morrow was talking about rightly was the stacking of special benefits. At no point did our committee address the stacking of those special benefits with regular EI, and of course it's one of the most fundamental problems with our EI system is that if, for example, you're on maternity leave, you're intending to go back to work, but your company shuts down, you're laid off, downsized while you're on maternity leave, it is not possible now to stack your maternity benefits with your regular EI. That is something that is absolutely critical for us as legislators to look to do. And as I said earlier in my speech, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what my private member's bill does. I look forward to all members of the House supporting that bill when it comes forward. Thank you very much.
Order. The time for government orders has expired. The honourable member from Hamilton Mountain will have 4 minutes remaining for questions and comments when this matter returns before the House. Statements by members. The honourable member for Edmonton East.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to recognize 33 youthful delegates who have visited with us for the past 7 weeks. They're here in members' offices to gain valuable perspectives on Canada's most important democratic institution, the Parliament of Canada. These young people representing the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Program embody the highest ideals of achievement and community service. They are the future leaders of Ukraine. Young people like Yaroslav Barkov from my office. Canada and Ukraine are inextricably linked forever by prior migration. Fully 1 in 30 Canadians are of Ukrainian descent, as are my wife, daughters, and granddaughters. Ukraine holds a special place in the hearts of Canadians. Canada was the first country in the Western world to accord diplomatic recognition in 1991 to an independent Ukraine. As the young emissaries depart, we wish them well and say to them, Mana Hailita.
The honourable member for London West.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend I participated in the Mad London's 25th anniversary Red Ribbon campaign. Held at Kia London, Mothers Against Drunk Driving launched its annual challenge to Londoners not to drink and drive, to get behind the wheel. London Police Chief Brad Duncan reminded us that the RIDE program will be out in full force to help put a stop to totally preventable, heart-wrenching accidents and deaths. We heard a tragic story from Mary Rodriguez. You see, Mary was driving through an intersection when her car was T-boned by a drunk driver. Her son Alex was in the car. Alex was killed. Alex was 4 months old. Mary challenged us to honor her son by following the simplest of rules. If you drink, don't drive. Project Red Ribbon runs until the first Monday after New Year's and will see volunteers distribute millions of red ribbons to the public to attach to their vehicles and keychains. It pays tribute to the more than 1,000 Canadians who do not need to die every year because of selfish, stupid, and impaired drivers. We have to make drinking and driving as socially unacceptable as lighting up a cigarette in a non-smoking area. If you cannot do it for yourself, do it for Alex.
The honourable member for Hamilton. The honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, as Canadians across the country take part in Remembrance Day services this week, I would like to bring to the attention of this House a special ceremony in Hamilton. In Hamilton in 1959, a cenotaph was unveiled on the grounds of the former Stelco plant. That day, more than 800 steelworkers who were members of the Stelco War Veterans Associations marched in that initial dedication ceremony. This cenotaph has been the site of Remembrance Day services ever since. This year's ceremony will have new significance as U.S. Steel Canada has recently completed the revitalization of this very important cenotaph dedicated to the 3,000 Stelco workers, the veterans, and their families. The cenotaph's renovations include complete refurbishment of the plaques with the names of the 172 steelworkers who gave their lives in the service of Canada. Mr. Speaker, I call on the members in this House to join me in remembering those brave steelworkers who sacrificed their lives in the service of Canada.
The honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge the life and work of Robert Bob Burns of Estevan, Saskatchewan, in the constituency of Souris Moose Mountain. Robert was born in 1930 in the hills of southwestern Saskatchewan in the Wood Mountain area. Sports like baseball, softball, skating, curling, and hockey were always a big part of his life. During his years, he worked as a grain buyer, car salesman, and for 25 years, a retail salesman with Sears Canada. He always believed in being a team player and devoted much of his life helping youngsters to be involved in the sport of hockey and ball. He picked them up, at times fed them, kept them at his home, and he coached and taught them not only about sports but important life lessons as well. He believed that to be successful in sports and in life, you have to give 100%, hold your head high, and be a good sport. It is these great attributes and qualities in Robert and his life contribution to the many communities in Cirrus Moose Mountain that is recognized in the awarding of a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal to him. Congratulations, Bob. The way to go.
The honourable member for St. Paul's.
Mr. Speaker, November 12th to November 17th is Family Doctor Week in Canada. Family Doctor Week proudly acknowledges the outstanding contributions of Canadian family doctors for their dedication to their patients and the delivery of high-quality care.
We know, thanks to our patients, that our family physicians are irreplaceable and how important they are to help patients and their families.
Tribute to Dr. Calvin Gutkin, who is retiring as Executive Director and CEO of the College of Family Physicians of Canada. Au cours de ces dernières années,
over the last 16 years, he has worked tirelessly for family physicians and all Canadians to improve family medicine.
The successful evolution of the Family Medicine Forum, the enhancement of medical student and resident training as the future of family medicine, and spearheaded the development of the National Physician Survey. Most recently, he helped author and is currently advocating for the patient's medical home as the next significant step in enhancing family practice care in Canada. Cal is a true believer in family medicine, and we thank him for his endeavours and wish him well in the future.
The honourable member for Leeds Grenville.
Mr. Speaker, on November 1st, I hosted my 6th annual Hockey Night in Leeds Grenville. This charity hockey match features former NHL stars, local dignitaries, and members of Parliament on the ice, raising money for the United Way of Leeds and Grenville. The game ended in a tie, but I'm pleased to report that the real winner was the United Way, as we raised $112,000 for their campaign. I want to thank the donors who made this game and its results possible. I also want to thank the fans who came out to support this great cause. I'd also like to thank Crystal Sled and Executive Director Judy Burry and her team at the United Way for their tremendous organizing efforts. And special thanks go out to former NHL star Doug Smith, who was the honorary chair of this event. The event was held in Athens this year with the support of that community's council headed up by Mayor Herb Scott. And finally, George and Kevin Tackaberry of Tackaberry & Sons deserve special mention. They made a very large donation and then topped it off to bring the total to $112,000.
The honourable member. First, let's point out that the Conservatives have the ignominious record of imposing closure 29 times since the beginning of this Parliament. I will take this opportunity to urge the government to act on employment insurance. For several weeks now, we learned that their insidious machinations are putting enormous pressure on people looking for work who are already having a tough time making ends meet. On the one hand, the government is swooping down on the unemployed like desperate vultures, forcing them to apply for 3 to 5 job openings per week. Why? Because apparently there is a shortage of workers. On the other hand, we have facts. Statistics Canada confirmed that the Canadian economy is not creating enough jobs, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer has revealed that the 2012 cutbacks have cut an additional 125,000 jobs. Canadians need to work. The government has stopped wasting its time attacking the unemployed and do what it was elected to do. You want the unemployed to work? The solution is simple: create jobs.
The honourable member for Portage Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, as we all prepare for possible boundary changes in our ridings, I would like to bring the attention of this House to a location of immense importance in Western Canada. The primary meridian sits on a small plot of land in the northeast corner of my riding of Portage Lisgar. This is where, beginning in 1872, the Dominion surveyor measured, mile by mile, on all points of the compass, over 200 million acres of land from Manitoba to British Columbia. Immigrants and settlers moved onto the land, and the words section, half section, and quarter section came into our vocabulary. Our roads, our farms, our towns and villages, all designated from this one simple beginning. Mr. Speaker, the measure of any great nation is the strength of its history and the character of its people. The primary meridian is an important starting point for the Western Canada that we know and that we love. Today, a cairn marks this historic spot in my riding and preserves its history for centuries to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Willowdale.
Mr. Speaker, it is a pleasure to rise today to share with you and this House the success of some of our young scientists for their candidacy for the Canadian Young Scientist Journal Best Paper Awards. As you may know, the Canadian Young Scientist Journal, located in my riding of Willowdale, provides a unique opportunity to high school students to express their views on a broad range of scientific topics and introduce themselves to the national scientific community. The competition helps young people to discover the innovation potential of tomorrow through a platform that allows them to discuss their ideas with their peers and academic communities. The success of these young scientists will surely lead them onto the path to university or further research. Today, I congratulate Apsi Chabokwoti, Brittany Allen, Carlos Shu, Alexandra Fish, and Rachel McLeay. They have worked hard to come up with some of the best papers in this cross-Canada competition. These aspiring young scientists are truly leading citizens of our nation and the world. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that you and all honourable members join me today in recognizing the achievement of these young scientists. Thank you.
The honourable member for Scarborough Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, it's my great privilege to rise today to pay tribute to Stephen Lewis on the occasion of his 75th birthday on November 11th. I'm very proud to follow in the footsteps of New Democrats like Stephen Lewis, who have represented my community. Stephen was the MPP for Scarborough West for 15 years, 8 of them as leader of the Ontario NDP. Among his many accomplishments, Stephen served as Canada's ambassador to the United Nations and the UN Special Envoy for HIV/AIDS in Africa, work that he continues today through the Stephen Lewis Foundation. Anyone who has heard him speak knows of his oratory skills and mastery of the English language. They also know of his passion for Africa, his passion for women's rights and equality, and his passion for a just society. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the official opposition and indeed all New Democrats, I'd like to wish Stephen Lewis a happy 75th birthday and extend our best wishes for many more to come. Thank you.
The honourable member for Okanagan-Coquihalla.
Mr. Speaker, the 70th anniversary of the Dieppe raid in August was a powerful reminder of the bravery and dedication that Canadians demonstrated during the Second World War. Of the nearly 5,000 Canadians who participated, only 2,210 returned to England, many of them wounded. Tragically, 916 Canadians died as a result. Those who participated in the Dieppe raid were among the more than 1 million Canadians who served during the Second World War. Their efforts helped ensure victory was achieved. During the Second World War, approximately 55,000 Canadians were wounded and more than 45,000 gave their lives in the fight for freedom. This was a remarkable sacrifice for a young nation with a population of only 11 million people. It is our duty to preserve the legacy these courageous men and women granted us and ensure their selfless dedication is never forgotten. Right. We must pass the torch of remembrance on to future generations so they too can understand and appreciate the importance of commemoration. Lest we forget, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The digital world offers an incredible opportunity for free expression, social engagement, and learning, and yet, along with this unprecedented access come serious issues, particularly for young people who are navigating the world of chat pages and social media. This is why privacy online is a right. Privacy matters, and this is the message of the National Media Literacy Week. The New Democrats are very proud to support the 7th Annual Media Literacy Week that was launched by Media Smarts, who, along with the Canadian Teachers Federation and 70 other organizations, are working with young people, teachers, and community leaders to raise awareness and raise an understanding of digital literacy online. And we call on this government to get proactive, to ensure that the rights of young people online are protected and to ensure that the Privacy Commissioner has the tools she needs to protect the rights of Canadians in the digital realm.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for La Bitinière-Sud de la Chaudière. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank everyone who generously shared their poems, thoughts, stories, and feelings in the book dedicated to veterans under the tab Collections and Registries. I would like to quote part of a text written by Miss Madeleine Heckberg entitled Remember. Remember their existence, the war they waged, the lives they saved, the freedom they gave us. That was their existence. Remember that in the name of justice, many perished for the love of their country, these beloved children who fought for justice. They were proud souls, their gaze open and turned towards the sky. We counted on them, and they could count on us. Some perished while others still live. We love them just as much, and we thank them today. Mr. Speaker, I join my voice to this poem penned by Ms. Ekberg, Lest We Forget.
The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on the eve of the 74th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, when in 1938 Nazi troops stormed Jewish neighborhoods in Germany, vandalizing Jewish homes and businesses, desecrating synagogues and cemeteries, arresting some 30,000 Jews, murdering others, burning books as a precursor to burning people in the atrocities to come. We commemorate Kristallnacht on the eve also of Remembrance Day, when we honor the brave men and women who fought for Canada and for freedom, who were instrumental in defeating the Third Reich. This week is also Holocaust Education Week, wherein the lessons of the Holocaust are being transmitted to generations of Canadians and will resonate globally with Canada's incoming chair of the International Task Force for Holocaust Remembrance and Education. Les leçons de l'Holocauste sont universelles.
Indeed, the lessons of the Holocaust are universal and more relevant than ever. Let's never forget the threat posed by cultures based on fear, nor the importance of denouncing injustice.
Remembrance Day ceremonies in my riding. As we remember the horrors of the past, let us ensure that the world will never experience such horrors again. Lest we forget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Mississauga East Cooksville.
Mr. Speaker, next week, members of Parliament will travel back to their ridings to speak with their constituents on the things that matter most to them. I can assure what we want here is a call for higher taxes. Canadians are pleased with our government's low-tax plan for jobs and growth and for lowering the price on almost everything with our 2% cut to GST. What they don't want to see is the NDP's proposed carbon tax that will raise the price on almost everything. Oh my God. Their sneaky tax scheme would have Canadians spend more of their hard-earned tax dollars on gas, groceries, and electricity. We can never let that happen. Why does the leader of the NDP want hard-working Canadians to pay for his $21 billion carbon tax?
Shame on him.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Newton North Delta.
Mr. Speaker, this week will be busy back in my riding, Newton North Delta. Not only will I have the pleasure of participating in multiple events, but I will also have to explain the $8 billion Conservative money grab. That's right, Mr. Speaker. For the last 6 years, Conservatives have been sneaking increases to users' fees for Canadians. They are now twice as high as they were a decade ago. And what are the Conservatives gouging Canadians for? Youth exchange programs, MAPs, family reunification, and even divorces. I could go on, Mr. Speaker. There are many, many more. What's worse is that almost all of their budget cuts are to the very services Canadians rely on. Increased user fees and blind and reckless cuts. It's a double whammy for Canadians and their wallets. And, Mr. Speaker, that is why we vote against their irresponsible agenda.
The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, in May of 2011, the NDP misled Canadians when they titled their election platform, Give Families a Break. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this could not be further from the truth. What they should have called their platform is Give Families a $21 billion carbon tax.
Exactly.
At least then it would be accurate. It is located right on page 4 in the same platform in black and white. An NDP carbon tax scheme that would raise the price on all things Canadian families need, like groceries, gas, electricity, and heat.
Wow.
In effect, this
That's
NDP
painful.
tax gets tough on Canadian families, not giving them a break, as the opposition will have Canadians believe. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, Canadian voters gave our Conservative government a mandate to keep taxes low, grow jobs, and really give Canadian families the break they so rightly deserve.
Order, order. Oral questions. Question orale.
The honourable member for Hull-Elmer. Mr. Speaker, today we learn that the Minister of Human Resources will announce a plan to privatize social services. She wants, among other things, to use the model of Goldman Sachs, the bank accused of fraud in the U.S. real estate scandal in the U.S. Nothing less to justify their massive cuts to expenditures for services to the public. Can they tell us exactly which services they intend to privatize? And why are they no longer part of the government's plans?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, our government has been focused on making sure that communities and families are well supported, and that's exactly what this initiative is doing. Very unlike the NDP's approach, whether or not we put forward initiatives like the Enabling Accessibility Fund, or whether it's the Registered Disability Savings Plan. These are initiatives to help Canadians and help communities, unlike the NDP's approach where they want to tax individuals to make sure that we can't provide those programs for them.
The honourable member for Hull-Elmer. Mr. Speaker, this withdrawal will not put more money in people's pockets. The other model the minister is using is the one implemented by the UK Conservatives. The British people opposed it, and the Conservatives there had to redo their plan 4 times. What we are being told here is that this proposal is nothing more than a PR exercise to justify new cuts to services to Canadians. Why imitate a plan that failed miserably in the United Kingdom?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we actually have a plan in this country. We have the Economic Action Plan, and we're putting it in place to make sure that Canadians have jobs. We want to make sure that Canadians are able to provide for themselves and build their communities, and that's exactly what we're doing with this initiative. I look forward to the NDP supporting the Economic Action Plan, but apparently they're not willing to do that. They're not willing to help create Canadian jobs, just like we've done. 820,000 net new jobs.
L'honorable député de
Honourable member for Hull-Elmer.
Parliamentary Budget Officer says that 85% of Conservative cuts are to frontline staff and services Canadians rely on. Service Canada is already in bad shape. 1 in 4 EI applications are not being processed on time. The majority of calls are not getting answered. Why is the only Conservatives' response to this is more privatization?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Speaker, that's certainly not the case. We've indeed put forward more resources to ensure that Canadians have the services when and where they need them all across this country. We've done so in a way that's economically efficient and responsible and reacts to indeed the needs of communities that are diverse all across the country. Just because things are being done differently, it doesn't mean that the NDP have to put on their tinfoil hats and come up with conspiracy theories. Because the reality is Canadians need these services. We're providing them. We've increased services to those communities that are most in need, and we'll continue to do so because they are indeed the services that Canadians have come to expect.
The Honourable Member for Halifax.
So the proposed Conservative model for fiscal restraint is to focus their cuts on the services that Canadians rely on and then use Goldman Sachs as a model for prudent management. What's motivating the Conservatives here isn't actually any concern about social services. It's a PR stunt to make up for the fact that they're making these reckless cuts. So can the Conservatives tell us what in the world they hope to learn about social service delivery from investment banks?
No. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned before, our government recognizes that we have to take steps to make sure and enable communities to tackle local problems. That's exactly what these initiatives do. They allow communities to deal with their local issues so that they can be effective in supporting families. Very unlike the NDP approach that want to tax and spend, make sure that Canadians don't have the funds in their pockets to help with their local communities. We're about creating jobs. We're about making sure we build communities. I encourage the NDP to support the Economic Action Plan that helps create those jobs and build those communities.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, today we also learned that Conservatives will stop maintaining cross-country ski trails in many of our national parks. They include Prince Albert National Park in Saskatchewan, Riding Mountain National Park in Manitoba, and Elk Island National Park in Alberta. This is another example of cuts to direct services. Can the Conservatives tell us if they plan to use a private company to deliver these services as well? Perhaps Goldman Sachs?
Very good.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, no government has done more when it comes to protecting our great natural spaces. National parks and historic sites will remain open this winter, and Parks Canada is working with volunteer groups to provide assistance and equipment for ski tracking and trail maintenance.
Wow. The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Public Safety. Yesterday he told the House in the course of an answer that he in fact had been instrumental in instructing officials to settle the civil suit between Ashley Smith's family and the Government of Canada. I'd like to ask the Minister, what facts was he aware of which led him to reach that conclusion? Secondly, does the government have other videos in its possession with respect to the treatment of Ashley Smith? And does it have other videos in its possession with respect to the treatment of other people in our prison system, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the Minister of Public Safety was indeed very clear on this matter yesterday. And of course, the treatment of Ashley Smith is indeed a tragedy, and that's why the coroner's inquest, which is indeed ongoing, the Minister of Public Safety has instructed all those who are associated with this inquiry to provide all the information necessary so that we can not only get to the bottom of the Ashley Smith incident specifically, but also more broadly ensure that the treatment of those who are in custody going forward are indeed treated with the respect and appropriate techniques that are indeed improved, obviously, greatly based on the tragedy that we saw in the treatment of Ashley Smith.
The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
It's interesting that the minister who is aware of the facts did not respond to the question, but I accept the fact that it's the minister who is responding on behalf of the government. However, we need to have peaceful responses. I asked for a very specific answer. I asked a very specific question. I think we're entitled to a specific answer as well. Is the government aware of the facts for which he reached the conclusion that he was instrumental in settling this suit regarding Ashley Smith? Is there other videos regarding Ms. Smith? Are they in possession of other videos on other individuals within Canadian prisons with mental health issues, Mr. Speaker?
Honourable members, not to refer who is or is not in the chamber. The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Merci, Mr. Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question was clear and my answer was clear. The minister said yesterday, and we are stressing it again here today, that all the information be provided to the investigation so that we can have the results we need to ensure that justice is done not only in the case of Ashley Smith, but to have a process in the future that is better than what we saw in the videos.
For Toronto Centre.
With great respect, Mr. Speaker, the Minister for Public Safety is in the House. That's why I asked him the question. He is here. He's here.
Order. What I said was that members should not refer to who is or is not in this chamber. If the honourable member from Toronto Centre could proceed.
I won't refer to the fact that the minister is not, in fact, answering the question that I asked him. But I will ask the same minister, why is he not answering this question? I'm asking him a very specific question. What facts led you to settle with Ashley Smith's family? What videos did the government have in its possession? Those are very clear questions. What other videos do you have in your possession? What other photographs do you have in your possession? What other things do you have in your possession about the mistreatment of mental patients who are in our prisons, Mr. Speaker?
Give us the Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Well, Well, Mr. Speaker, indeed we do take this particular case and indeed the broad subject indeed very seriously, which is why we are, of course, working with the inquest to ensure that all the information is being given forward. But indeed, more broadly, Mr. Speaker, we do want to ensure that Canadians do understand that we have indeed invested into our regime for supporting mental health across this country, not only in the correction system, but beyond that. And we want to ensure that the tragedy and the cruelty, frankly, that Ashley Smith faced is not repeated in the future. And that's why the Minister has taken the responsible action to ensure that all the information is coming forward.
The Honourable Member for Esquimalt-Wanda-Fuga.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the government and the Minister for Toronto Centre paid any attention to the correctional investigator, they'd know he already reviewed more than 60 hours of tapes with regard to Ashley Smith and made recommendations more than 2 years ago. Would the Minister of Public Safety, when he's asked to implement those recommendations to ensure that no one else faces the same fate as Ashley Smith, the Minister responded with an absurd partisan attack. Ashley was a victim of the system, a system unprepared to deal with mental illness. This time, can the Minister spare us the talking points and platitudes? Will he apologize to Ashley Smith's family, and will he commit today to implementing the correctional investigator's recommendations?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
I note the member is reading from his talking points. What I am prepared to say in response to his talking points is that this tragedy, in fact, continues to show that individuals with mental health issues do not belong in prison, but rather in professional health facilities. At the same time, our government continues to take concrete steps on the issue of mental health in prison. Since 2006, we have invested nearly $90 million in mental health for prisoners, and we continue to take action to improve access to mental health treatment and training for staff.
The Honourable Member for Esquimalt-Wanda-Fuga.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister just admitted once again that individuals with mental illnesses don't belong in prison. But on their watch, the intake of inmates with mental illnesses has nearly doubled. The system is not equipped to deal with this problem, and the Conservatives refuse to fix it. Instead, they've tied the hands of judges with mandatory minimums, cut the corrections budget, and ignored the consequences in and outside prison. Again, the same simple question. Will the Minister listen to the correctional investigator and implement his recommendations?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our police and our judges do the work that they're assigned to do by Parliament under the Criminal Code. In that context, people with mental health issues have landed up not only in our federal penitentiaries, but in our provincial jails. We sat down last week with the provincial ministers and said we need to find a better way of dealing with those who have mental health problems. And I know that the member is concerned about this. I can tell him that all of the ministers right across Canada are very concerned about coming up with a solution to this.
The Honourable Member for Gatineau.
Smith, who hasn't had justice, just look at what's happening in Alberta, where judicial resources are stretched to the breaking point. The case of an accused child molester was thrown out of court for unreasonable delays after more than 3 years in the court system. The Conservative failure to provide adequate judicial resources has real consequences. Will the minister step up and fulfill Alberta's request for additional judges?
Excellent. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
We consider all requests from our provincial counterparts, and I'm quite frankly pleased to see the opposition has discovered the justice file here. I think it's an important one, and one that we have made a priority over the years, and I hope that this new interest will extend to supporting the legislation that we have brought forward to crack down on criminals and stand up for victims in this country. I hope we get that from. It would be great.
The Honourable Member for Gatineau. And this is also what they say about bullying. They just have a bully style. Last week, during the meeting of the Ministers of Justice, the provinces and territories, in fact, shared their concerns regarding cuts to justice programs for young people, the underfunding of the legal aid program, and the shortage of police officers, particularly in First Nations communities. They also are critical of the lack of consultations on federal crime bills. Consultations, zero from the federal government. Will the Minister of Justice fix the problems identified by?
Minister of Justice.
We've been fixing these problems, Mr. Speaker, over the years with no help whatsoever from the NDP and their colleagues, Mr. Speaker. But under the leadership of our finance minister, the transfers to the provinces have been up 43% since the year 2006, Mr. Speaker. I think that's very impressive. And again, Mr. Speaker, we support the provinces. We support non-governmental organizations. We have programs at the federal level, all better designed to tackle crime in this country and assist victims across Canada. This is what we should do, and we should have the support of everyone in this House on that.
The honourable member for Dartmouth-Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On matters of justice and the provincial government, maybe the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs could work with the provinces to try and help solve some of these problems. Because the Prime Minister has been alienated in the provinces, even refusing to attend an upcoming First Minister's meeting in Halifax. In fact, he won't even sit down with the premiers to discuss our shaky economy. So will the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister be attending the First Minister's meeting in Halifax? And will he give us some idea about his plan to correct the problems in the relationship between the provinces and the federal government?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I certainly hope the honourable member didn't miss this, but, Mr. Speaker, just last week we met with our provincial counterparts. Myself and the Public Safety Minister sat down with our provincial and territorial counterparts. We had a great discussion with respect to areas of mutual concern, Mr. Speaker, cracking down on crime, updating the criminal code, standing up for victims and law-abiding Canadians. It was a very fruitful, very productive discussion. I was very pleased to have it. I hope that has the support of everyone here.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, we're really trying to help the minister from Labrador here, but he's not really doing much. You know, he gets a limo, he gets a driver, he gets lots of staff, he gets a very generous pay from the taxpayer, and for that he's supposed to be able to stand up and explain himself. So go something simpler. Why was 79% of the travel expenses as minister spent in his own province? Now that's on top of the $18,000 in free flights he hid in the campaign. So we have a simple question. Is he using his ministerial dollars and taxpayers' dollars to perpetually campaign around his riding?
The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to a strong relations with the provinces and territories based on true respect for their jurisdictions. I work with my counterparts to ensure that a strong relationship continues to grow. I also make priority to ensure that our government is doing its part in fostering jobs and growth in Newfoundland and Labrador and across Canada. Mr. Speaker, that is what we do, and that is what we'll continue to do.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Yeah, but what he hasn't done is explain why he's blowing all this money in his riding, like he hasn't explained about his campaign spending. You know, this man, I'm sorry, but he's like a poster boy for why we need stronger laws at Elections Canada. So let's get on to that. This past week, Elections Canada praised the New Democratic Party for pushing for stronger powers to the Chief Electoral Officer to deal with voter fraud. And meanwhile, we also learned from new affidavits that it was the Conservative Party headquarters that had the call list that went out for voter suppression. So what are they doing? Are they going to sit and wait for the next RCMP raid against Conservative Party headquarters, or are they going to come clean with the taxpayers?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs has made it clear that we need to improve our electoral laws. That's why he's going to bring forward legislation to do that. But, you know, the problem isn't always that we need to improve our electoral laws. The problem is that some parties, like the NDP, don't even follow our election finance laws, having accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars of illegal donations that they then were required to pay back. They decided behind closed doors what was going on with Elections Canada. They didn't disclose it to this House or to Canadians. They're the ones who have to be accountable to Canadians for this, and they're not willing to do that.
Honourable member for Rosemount Petite Patrie. I think that when you're found guilty of in and out and the RCMP has to raid your office, you might not be so quick to try to teach a lesson. After a year and a half of investigations, people are eager to know who is behind the largest elections fraud in Canadian history, but the Conservatives are dragging their feet. They're refusing to give additional powers to Elections Canada. It's strange. It's as if they had something to hide and they're trying to buy some time. when we know that the Conservative headquarters supplied the voters list for robocalls. It gets even fishier. When will they stop hiding these who've done wrong? When will they?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, they start out by attacking the minister for spending time in his constituency and reaching out to the people of Labrador. Perhaps if the member for Timmins spent as much time reaching out to his constituents, he would know that they did not want him to break his word and vote in favor of the much despised Liberal long gun registry. But, you know, at the same time, he has a seatmate who won't even answer the simple question of whether he believes his province should still be in the country. I'll give him a chance to stand up and declare it.
Order. The Honourable Member for Toronto Danforth.
In a federal court affidavit, the COO of RMG is clear. Scripts were constructed to inform voters of polling changes in the last week of the campaign. The calls were based wholly on data provided by the Conservative Party. Such unreported data is crucial for Elections Canada to complete its investigation, but there's nothing in the Elections Act to require such reporting. Will Conservatives support my bill that would enforce strict reporting of voter telecommunications during campaigns? Yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Democratic Reform has made it quite clear that we need to improve Canada's elections laws. That's why he's going to bring forward legislation to do exactly that. And we continue to gather input from other sources. In fact, just the other day, I've seen media reports of a further report from the Chair of Elections, Chair of Elections Canada, suggesting that we should be considering other changes. So he will look at comprehensively at what needs to be changed and bring forward proposals that will address those problems so that we won't have the kinds of issues we've had with the Liberals, with loans that aren't being paid back from their leadership contestants that are effectively illegal donations and, of course, the kind of illegal donations.
Order. The Honourable Member for Toronto Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, to the Minister of Public Safety. Can the Minister tell us what facts and documentation in possession of the government led them to settle out of court with Ashley Smith's family? Does the government still have in its possession other videos and documentation with respect to Ashley Smith going back further than just 1 year? And can the government tell us, will it guarantee that the other videos in its possession with respect to the treatment of people who have mental challenges and mental problems who have ended up in Canada's prisons, will it guarantee that they will not destroy those videos and that documentation, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, any of the records that the leader of the third party is asking for would be in the custody of Corrections Canada. And as you know, the government has very clearly directed the Corrections Canada to work with the coroner's inquest, and that's where this matter is being dealt with, in a public forum, in a fully transparent way.
The Honourable Member for Avalon.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that the member for Labrador is drowning in his election irregularities. The management of the relationship between the federal government and the provinces is a major job, and the minister is simply not doing his job. His own website shows only 3 meetings with provincial counterparts, and that was all in 2011. God only knows what he's been doing in 2012. He's been ripping off the taxpayers. That's what he's been doing, and by not doing his job. Will the minister admit to not doing his job and resign immediately?
The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs.
Sometimes I just can't believe how rude and how bullish these people can be.
Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs.
Our government has a strong relationship with provincial and territorial governments. I meet with counterparts regularly and focus on strength of the province in growing Canada's economy. Mr. Minister, new exploration and investment are occurring across Canada and especially in Labrador. In my role as Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, I get to share these success stories with people from coast to coast to coast, and I'm working hard to ensure that all Canadians benefit.
The honourable member for St. Paul's.
Mr. Speaker, while the government's slashing frontline services to Canadians, they're spending a record $500 million on lawyers, an increase of almost 40% in the past 3 years alone. Instead of doing the right thing, they say, see you in court. They're using the courts to quash First Nations child rights, to fight with veterans over the clawback of their military pensions. When will this government do the work with Canadians on finding real solutions rather than spending millions of dollars on lawyers?
Bravo. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, Mr. Speaker, at any given time, the federal government is involved with nearly 50,000 litigation files, and the costs are based on a number of cases, including fighting on behalf of residential school survivors, as well as fighting against big tobacco, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we make no apologies for defending the rights of Canadians in court.
The
Honourable Member for La Salle-Mar. The head of energy research at HoC spoke recently in Beijing. He told oil industry leaders that if Canada didn't approve the building of pipelines to China, the oil sands would be outdated. The Nexen transaction hasn't even been approved yet, and HoC is already announcing its intention to obtain greater access to the oil sands. Why are the Conservatives allowing themselves to be intimidated by this state-run corporation in China that simply wants to buy up our energy resources? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect for my colleague opposite, there's a lot of fabulation there. I think it's clear, Mr. Speaker, that each decision made with respect to foreign investments are always in the best interest of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, in the transaction with HoC and Nexen, we are examining net benefits for Canada, and I will point out that the transaction is being scrutinized carefully. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for La Salle-Mar. The Conservatives seem to have trouble understanding that their new investment agreement with China, under the agreement, do the Conservatives realize that national treatment for Chinese state corporations gives them the same rights as Canadian corporations when it comes to buying new oil concessions and expanding their operations in Canada?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I explained yesterday the FIPA between Canada and China is about recognizing Chinese investment rights in Canada and Canadian investment rights in China. It's as simple as that. There's nothing nefarious about this. I would ask the honourable member, though, why the NDP consistently oppose trade. Why would they allow members of the NDP party, like the member from the BC Southern Interior, to say that trade threatens the very existence of our nation? Where does that come from? Where does that mindset come from? And what does that say about the future of the NDP party?
Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates worked diligently to identify key reforms to improve the capacity of MPs to deliver their constitutional duty to scrutinize government spending. Reforms based on the advice of renowned parliamentary experts. Despite two similar reports over the last decade, the government voted to throw these reforms in the dustbin. Why is this government refusing to make the very reforms needed to usher in the once promised open, transparent, participatory democracy?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Speaker, the Government of Canada overwhelmingly agreed with the recommendations from this particular committee. Specifically, I can say to this House that there is a direct relationship now, a new structure for approving spending that will provide taxpayers and parliamentarians with a clear and traceable line between spending approvals and specific government programs. Mr. Speaker, no other government has done this. We're proud of the initiatives that we have taken to improve transparency and improve the ability of parliamentarians to review the budget.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Louis-Hébert. Well, they didn't listen to the main recommendation with respect to the PBO, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, at the Government Operations Committee, the Conservatives contributed to writing and adopting the committee report, which made a number of suggestions with respect to ways of making government finances more transparent, and months and months of work went into it. But yesterday, instead of taking a stand, standing up for their work, they supported an irresponsible amendment to shelve the report and to simply cancel out their own work. Will a member of the conservative member of the committee explain to us why they've made this about face?
The Honourable President Treasury.
Now, as I said in the past, Mr. Speaker, we accepted most recommendations from the committee in the report. It's important to have greater transparency, accountability, and we accept that report. It's important to have the consideration of members, their comments on the budget, and we've accepted the bulk of their recommendations.
Nephi, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Remembrance Day is a time for all Canadians to remember the sacrifices of Canada's fallen. As parliamentarians, we are privileged to stand in this House, regardless of political differences, and represent the very democracy of Canada's veterans who fought and gave their lives for. I would like to ask the Minister of Veteran Affairs if he could comment on the importance of recognizing the services and sacrifices of Canada's veterans.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Member from Desnety, Mississippi, Churchill River, and a former RCMP officer, Mr. Speaker, is absolutely right. We as Canadians, as parliamentarians, owe a tribute to our veterans because it's because of their sacrifice that we can stand for democracy in this very House. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, over the course of the weekend, I would invite all parliamentarians to take time to thank our veterans, to extend a hand to them, to place a wreath, and to say thank you. To say thank you, Canada thanks you for the sacrifices you've made to our country.
Order. L'honorable député de la Vallée.
The Honourable Member for the Val-des-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because of bad Conservative policies, only 4 lakes in Quebec are now protected. In response to a question from my colleague for Argenteuil-Papineau-Mirabel, the Minister of Transport said that he wouldn't be going everywhere into every coffee shop to consult people. According to him, consultations among representatives are enough. Can the Minister tell us, who in Sorel said they thought it was acceptable for Lac Saint-Pierre, which has the biggest archipelago in the St. Lawrence and a heronry in North America, is no longer protected? Who told them that? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, now here's the difference. They talk about herons, we talk about boats. Mr. Speaker, what we want to talk about here is navigation and managing navigation. And people from the environment will manage the environment. Fishery and Oceans will do the same. They're mixing it all up. When we talk about navigation, what we want to do is ensure that we do what must be done so that municipalities and provinces have asked us to do to remove delays and bureaucracy.
Well, the Muskoka minister made sure that his lakes and rivers were protected in the budget, just not other important waterways that support recreation and fishing. The Bowmanville Creek in the riding of Durham is a great example. The creek has recently seen salmon stocks improve due to local efforts. Sadly, the Conservatives' new budget bill will remove protection from this waterway. Bridges and impediments can go through without federal review. Now, why did the Conservatives abandon protection of this waterway?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, the protection of waterways, we have many rules, many bills to protect that. In our department, we have to protect control navigation, Mr. Speaker. That's what we have done. Let me be clear, 98% of applications received never pose a threat to navigation. 98%. That means that they want to invest money for absolutely nothing, but it's not the case. This is not a responsible issue of taxpayer dollars and shows just how much change is needed. That is why we have reformed the Act. Now our resources can focus on where is navigation, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, aftershocks of the massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake that struck Haida Gwaii over a week ago were still shaking the BC coast last night. It was a close call, far too close. Instead of cutting programs that help community emergency response, as Conservatives are doing, we need to make sure that every protection is available to our towns and villages in the event of a major natural disaster. Will the minister commit today to work with the people of Haida Gwaii and make all the necessary investments to keep our communities safe?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the majority of emergencies in Canada are local in nature and managed by local or provincial governments. We, in fact, have worked very closely with local governments. We're now focusing on some of the things that the federal government can do better. For example, the mitigation program that was announced by the Prime Minister for Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Quebec, $99 million to assist with the flooding. We're also in overall discussions with the provinces about a national mitigation program, and I hope I can get the support of that member for this.
The Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
The hard truth about the Conservatives' recent monster budget bill is an affront to democracy and a direct attack on our environment. By warping a law meant to protect our rivers into a pipeline promotions act, by ignoring the good people of Victoria, Haida Gwaii, and the coastal communities of British Columbia, this Conservative government is threatening the very resources we rely upon. When will BC Conservative MPs actually stand up for our beautiful province in this place? When are they going to stand up for British Columbia and stop selling it out?
The Honourable Minister. Order. The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, these changes are designed to improve navigation throughout the country, across the country, including British Columbia. It doesn't take anything away, Mr. Speaker, from the obligations of other departments. All projects will be subjected to federal law, to the Environmental Protection Act, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, the Fisheries Act, the Migratory Waterways Act, and I could continue, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of aspects that will ensure that our nature is protected, but we are focusing on navigation, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, let's look at government assistance for veterans' funerals. Serving members of the Canadian Forces get $12,700. Some traditional vets get $3,600. Modern-day veterans get zero. Veterans who earn more than $1,000 a month get zero. It's time that we embrace one veteran, one standard. When will the government treat all of our veterans fairly and evenly?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's a big file after all of the lack of action by the previous Liberal government. Over the past 6 years, we've invested for our veterans, and I can assure veterans that we don't plan to cut programs like the Liberals before us did. In the same program, each week, in fact, Mr. Speaker, we continue to improve the quality of life for veterans. We improve service because what we saw in the past was terrible. The Honourable Member for Beauséjour. Mr. Speaker, I've received petitions signed by thousands of people opposed to change to EI as being proposed by the Conservatives. These people fully understand that in the depth of winter back home, there are no jobs, and that the Prime Minister is punishing them because he thinks that these people are just lazy. Why does the Prime Minister refuse to meet with these workers? And why is the government refusing to change their plans, which will punish people working in seasonal industries and their employers?
Secretary to the Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our government has been focused on making sure that Canadians have an opportunity to have jobs in their local area that meet their local qualifications and their qualifications overall. We have created 820,000 net new jobs in this country since the downturn of the recession. That's why we're focused on making sure that Canadians have opportunities for jobs. So just like in my riding of Simcoe Grey, where seasonal workers have great opportunities, we're building those opportunities for Canadians in the future.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker, retired workers from Resolute Forestry Products are very concerned about the threats to their pension. A little earlier this week, the company announced they would be cutting 111 jobs in the Grand Mare facility. In Claremont, workers still don't even know if they're going to be going back to work. Mr. Speaker, Canada is one of the only countries in the OECD that doesn't provide protection for pensions in the event of bankruptcy or insolvency. But what are the Conservatives waiting for? When will we see legislation to protect the pension funds of Canadian workers? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Allow me, first of all, Mr. Speaker, to offer my sympathies to people who are facing these difficulties. Unfortunately, though, it's unfortunate, but the government can, or the people can, in fact, benefit from what we've done in government. We've made changes to ensure that regular pension plans are paid before other debtors are paid off. We've also provided protection for wage earners up to $3,400. Now, I know that the member opposite wasn't in the Parliament at that time, but her party voted down those changes as well. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, Luxarama in Saint-Jérôme went under bankruptcy protection and laid off 200 people. With the holidays just around the corner, employees are devastated. Not only are they losing their jobs without any advance notice, but wait times for EI is on average 39 days in Quebec, when it shouldn't be more than 28. Now, for weeks, I've been listening to the Minister of Human Resources tell us that she's working on improving service delivery. But I apologize, the Minister needs to recognize that Canadians...
Order. Order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, our government's priority is economic growth and job creation. Service Canada will continue to work to respond to Canadians quickly.
Provide improvements and update its operations so that Canadians have opportunities to access our programming. Mr. Speaker, we're using taxpayers' dollars the best. We want to make sure that Canadians have opportunities to access all programming available to them.
The Honourable Member for Wild Rose.
Yesterday, our nation's exporters were disappointed when the NDP voted against Canada's free trade agreement with Panama. After having delayed the agreement for more than 2 years, this was obviously no surprise, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the Leader of the Opposition has said that if given the opportunity, he would repeal agreements that promote trade, increase Canadian exports, and protect Canadians doing business abroad. Can the Parliamentary Secretary please share with this House how our government is standing up for the interests of Canada's exporters?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member from Wild Rose is correct. The NDP's vote against our agreement with Panama was predictable. This is the same party that sent an anti-trade mission to Washington to lobby against Canadian jobs. It is the same party that has consistently opposed our government's initiatives to increase trade and promote Canadian exports. Mr. Speaker, while the NDP talks down Canada to the world, our Conservative government will continue to open new opportunities to grow Canadian exports and create Canadian jobs.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, 52 Conservative senators voted en masse to block MS sufferers from testifying before a Senate committee on Bill S-204. Can anyone imagine a committee hearing on cancer not calling cancer sufferers? Given this slap in the face to MS patients, will the government commit, if S-204 comes to the House, it will allow MS sufferers to testify? Will it give MS patients back their voice?
Fair question. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government recognizes the difficulties and the heartbreaks faced by the thousands of MS patients and their families across Canada. We were clear all along that we are committed to funding a clinical trial for CCSVI once all the necessary medical and ethical standards were met. That's why last month at the Health Ministers' meetings in Halifax, I announced that after a rigorous review process, clinical trials for CCSVI have been accepted and recruitments for patients to participate will begin this month.
L'honorable député de République.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, the Standing Committee on Government Operations just completed a study on public-private partnerships. PPPs are an insidious form of privatization, and as we're seeing these days in Quebec, there's a risk of collusion and corruption if we allow private corporations to take up too much space in managing public affairs. One of the recommendations that we want to put forth in the final report is to ensure more transparency and oversight as part of PPP contracts. Will the government implement that recommendation?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the P3 Canada Inc. has been remarkably successful and is announcing more and more partnerships, not only with certain municipalities, but with Aboriginal groups, First Nations in Canada, projects from coast to coast to coast. This is a Crown corporation. It operates on an objective, arm's-length manner. They review applications on the basis of merit. We do not comment, of course, on applications under review. I appreciate the interest of the member opposite in P3 Canada Inc. It does provide greater value to taxpayers, and it helps meet Canada's infrastructure needs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Miramichi.
Mr. Speaker, our government has long supported Canadian sealers and their families, while Hollywood activists have spread false information about the humaneness and practice of the hunt. Could the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans please inform the House of a recent study regarding the seal hunt and its humane practices, as well as our government's support for the industry?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Miramichi for raising this issue. Mr. Speaker, two veterinary researchers who have observed the hunt firsthand over several seasons have published a report indicating, and I quote, "There is no reliable evidence that the Canadian harp seal hunt differs from other forms of exploitation of wildlife resources from the perspective of animal welfare." Mr. Speaker, with a record high number of seals and highly regulated humane practices used in the hunt, this government will continue to defend Canadian sealers and their families against those who do not understand the practice of the hunt or how important it is to the traditional way of life in many communities.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, Conservative cuts to services and centralized processing for immigration applications have had a terrible impact on international adoption delays. Our riding offices are inundated with complaints from citizens who are denouncing longer and longer wait times for international adoption of children. Each month spent far from their new Canadian parents adversely affects the psychological and physical well-being of these children. Can the Minister of Immigration tell us what his plan is to solve this problem that was entirely created by the Conservatives?
Well, Parliament Secretary for Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry and this government recognizes the importance of Canadian families and what they place on being united with adopted children from abroad as quickly and efficiently as possible. Most cases, and also in all cases, as the member may know, they are done on a priority basis. There is no reason for anyone in the House to stand up and accuse this government of not doing what is absolutely right when it comes to adoption. It's about priority, it's about placement, and it's about doing the job properly.
L'Honorable Député de Richmond-Athabasca.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Justice accused us of ignoring his greatest achievements, but it's the government that ignored our question. The Minister can already put terrorist groups on a list and block or seize their assets, in addition to ordering banks to seize their accounts. Why not do the same thing with the mafia and the criminalized gangs, which, as we've seen in the news, are taking advantage of shortcomings in inspections in the Port of Montreal to use that place as a point of entry for their criminal activities. Will the Minister consider introducing an anti-mafia bill that targets prohibited crime groups as it is done for terrorist groups? What's good for the goose must be good for the gander.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, since forming government, We've passed legislation to arrest auto theft, ID theft, fraud, white-collar crime. All of these are directed at criminal organizations that turn a profit at the expense of Canadians. So, Mr. Speaker, we have had lots of legislation dealing with organized crime, and so I also say to the honourable member, if he wants to put the mob out of business, they should start supporting our efforts to do so.
Order. This concludes question period for today. I believe the Honourable Opposition House Leader, even though we're following a Friday schedule, has this regular Thursday question today.
Thursday remains Thursday. Let me check the table. Yes, we're still Thursday on a Friday schedule. Monsieur le Président, c'est un honneur.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour for me to rise to ask the government what it intends to put on our schedule for next week and the week thereafter.
Remembrance Day, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the ultimate price that has been paid all too many times by men and women, affecting all too many families in the name of Canadians and our most cherished rights and freedoms at home and abroad. We will never forget their sacrifice, particularly over the week of Remembrance Day ceremonies. Two specific questions for the House Leader today. What does he have planned for the House in the days following the Remembrance Constituency Week? And given the absolute disaster and sham of a process that the government has set up on the committee study of their monster budget bill, a number of the ministers and parliamentary secretaries and government MPs have contradicted one another as to what the process actually is. Does the government leader simply expect more from his most senior Minister of Finance on something so important as the budget of Canada? Or is this sham of a process going to suffice from now till the budget's reintroduction into the House?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And this afternoon, before we depart to our constituencies in advance of Remembrance Day, where most of us will be participating in remembrance services in our riding, we will this afternoon resume third reading debate on Bill C-28, the Financial Literacy Leader Act. The week of November 19th will continue to see a lot of important action at the House Committee level, where we are looking at that Budget Implementation Act, Bill C-45, the Jobs and Growth Act, as it advances through the legislative process. The Finance Committee, which is supported by 10 other committees that are looking at that, and altogether they will conclude the review of this very important bill and the very important job creation and economic measures that are laid out, measures that were first put before Parliament back in our March budget. Meanwhile, the House on Monday will continue the third reading debate of Bill C-44, the Helping Families in Need Act, which we started this morning. Given the support for the bill from all corners of the House, I hope that it will pass that day so that the Senate can pass it before the end of the year. After Bill C-44, it's our intention to take up the report stage in third reading of Bill S-11, the Safe Food for Canadians Act, which was reported back from the Agriculture Committee yesterday. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that we will see strong interest in passing that bill quickly, just as we did for second reading. Après l'adoption du projet de loi lundi,
once the bill passes on Monday, the House will return to third reading of Bill C-28, the Financial Literacy Leader Act, if we do not finish the debate today. And that will be followed by second reading of Bill S-8, the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, the Chamber will consider report stage and third reading of Bill C-27, the First Nations Financial Transparency Act, which was also reported back from committee yesterday.
House that on Tuesday, when we return from the Remembrance Day week, immediately after question period, Mr. Speaker, I will call Ways and Means Motion number 14, respecting some technical amendments to tax laws. And let me assure you that there should be no doubt about this, but the opposition will no doubt be disappointed. This motion will definitely not implement the New Democrats' $21.5 billion job-killing carbon tax. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on Thursday before question period, the House will resume second reading debate of Bill S-8, and after question period we will take up Bill S-2, the Family Homes on Reserves and Matrimonial Interests or Rights Act, also at second reading. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents, the Honourable President, Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A message from His Excellency the Governor-General signed by his own hand. Monsieur le Président, un message de Son Excellence le Gouverneur.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Governor General signed by his own hand.
Order. His Excellency the Governor General transmits to the House of Commons the supplementary estimates B of sums required to defray expenses of the federal public administration for the fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2013, and in accordance with Section 54 of the Constitution Act 1867, recommends these estimates to the House of Commons. Signed on October 25th, 2012. Aussi, Son Excellence le Gouverneur General.
As well, His Excellency the Governor General transmits to the House of Commons the supplementary estimates B for necessary appropriations for the funding of the federal administration for fiscal year ending March 31, 2013, and in accordance with Section 54 of the Constitution Act 1867. The budget of the House of Commons, October 25, 2012.
Documents, I believe the Honourable President of the Treasury Board has something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honor to table dans les deux langues officielles on behalf of 95 departments and agencies the performance reports for 2011-2012. I invite members to access the performance reports at www.tbs-sct.gc.ca/DPR-RMR.
Tabling of documents, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36.8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 43 petitions.
Go ahead. Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. The Honourable Member for Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 34.1, I have the honour to present to the House, in both official languages, the report of the Canadian Parliamentary Delegation of the Canada-Japan Interparliamentary Group respecting its participation at the 18th bilateral meeting with the Japan-Canada Diet Friendship League, which was held in Tokyo and Tohoku Region, Japan, May 20th to the 25th, 2012.
Presenting of reports from committees, the Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour of presenting in both official languages the second report of the Standing Committee on Official Languages on the study of the examination of the roadmap after the roadmap toward better programs and service delivery.
So Commons, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to this report. Thank you.
Introduction of private members' bills. The Honourable Member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is the longest study we had on official languages in Parliament. It certainly was longer than the budget. I can tell you that. We spent a year and a couple of months to study this matter. So we support this report, but with certain reservations. There will be a parallel report pointing out shortcomings in the report and its recommendations. As well, Mr. Speaker, regarding funding, seniors, media, health, the language industry, literacy, second language, and many more, early childhood education. This roadmap recommends that the government extend the roadmap in 2013. When we met with communities they really want the roadmap to be implemented again in 2013 for another period of time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dépôt du projet de loi émanant des députés, l'honorable député et Madame Turmel, appuyée.
Ms. Turmel, seconded by Mr. Ravignan, is asking for concurrence to table a bill, an act to amend the National Capital Act, Gatineau Park. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Hull-Aylmer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to table my bill to protect Gatineau Park. And I would like to thank the member for Pontiac for having supported it. Gatineau Park, through its size, its beauty, and significance, is a real national treasure. It is one of the most visited parks in Canada, and yet it is currently not protected, which would otherwise help guarantee its survival for future generations. I propose several amendments to the National Capital Act. In fact, my bill would establish the boundaries of the park. It would confer parliamentary protection on the park and forbid the sale of public lands included in it. Mr. Speaker, if we want to leave for future generations a healthy park which reflects its current status, we have to act now. So I would invite members of all parties who are represented in this chamber to support my bill at second reading. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Madame Turmel,
Ms. Turmel, seconded by Mr. Ravignan, moves that this bill be now read a first time and printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
When shall this bill be read a second time at the next sitting of the House?
Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. L'honorable député d'Acadie.
The Honourable Member for Acadie-Bathurst. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there were consultations with the parties, and I hope that if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion: that the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights be the designated committee for the examination of Section 533.1 of the Criminal Code. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The House has heard the terms of the motion. Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? He does not. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that, according to Standing Order 56.1, that the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights be the designated committee for the examination of Section 533.1 of the Criminal Code.
Mr. Van Loan, seconded by Mr. Clement, pursuant to Standing Order 56.11A, moves that the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights be the committee for the purposes of Section 533.1 of the Criminal Code, que le Comité Permanent de la Justice.
That the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights be the committee for the purposes of Section 533.1 of the Criminal Code.
Will those members who object to the motion please rise in their places? Fewer than 25 members having risen, the motion is adopted.
Presenting petitions.
L'honorable député de Pontiac.
Honourable Member for Pontiac. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two petitions to table today. The first concerns a petition asking the Government of Canada,
the ELA, to the Government of Canada's mandate to study, preserve and protect aquatic ecosystems, and reverse the decisions to close the ELA research station and continue to staff and provide financial resources to the ELA. And the second petition relates to calling upon the House to pass Bill C-398 without significant amendment to facilitate the immediate and sustainable flow of life-saving generic medicines to developing countries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard.
I have a petition to present today about the experimental lakes area. People who signed that petition asked to recognize the importance of the experimental lakes area. They asked to reserve the decision to close the experimental lakes area, and they also asked to continue to provide adequate resources to those experimental lakes area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, l'honorable député
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil-Papineau-Mirabel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased today to present this petition. The signatories, who are people from my riding as well as from across the country, in fact, all across the country, these signatories are asking the government to protect the motion on water in our rural communities. This petition is asking the government to protect the water, the environment, and ensure the vitality of our rural regions, and to ensure fairness between urban areas and rural areas. My motion has received a lot of support from across the country, environmental groups, citizens groups, and others. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Rouge River.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present two petitions on behalf of the residents of Scarborough Rouge River as well as people in other.
Order. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North is rising on point of order.
Yes, just on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. I noticed that traditionally in listening to petitions, quite often the Speaker will look around and acknowledge members from different parties as opposed to one political party consistently. And I'm wondering if, in fact, maybe because I know the lights are out over at this end on the top, on the ceiling, maybe that's preventing our members from being...
Order. The Honourable Member is quite correct that the Speaker sometimes does that, but it's not a requirement. It's the prerogative of the Chair to recognize members. As such, I'll continue to do that. The Honourable Member for Scarborough Rouge River.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present two petitions. The first calls upon the Government of Canada to urge the United Nations to immediately establish an independent, international, and impartial mechanism to ensure truth, accountability, and justice in Sri Lanka, following the United Nations report of the Secretary General's panel of experts on accountability in Sri Lanka, who found credible allegations which have proven indicate during the final stages of Sri Lanka's civil war that a wide range of serious violations of international humanitarian human rights law were committed. My second petition I present today, Mr. Speaker, is where the petitioners are calling for the repeal of Bill C-31. The petitioners are calling upon the Government of Canada to repeal Bill C-31, which they call the Punishing Refugees Act, and return to the framework of the Balanced Refugee Reform Act passed with support of all parties in the previous Parliament, as this current bill, Bill C-31, concentrates way too much power in the hands of one minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour to table today a petition from people from across the country of all social classes and all ages who are asking the government to take action and to adopt C-400, which proposes a national housing strategy. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, and I have two petitions today. The first from petitioners who are concerned about the Canada-EU Comprehensive Trade Agreement. Their concern, Mr. Speaker, is that subnational governments and public agencies will not be able to procure locally, and that would have a negative impact on our economies. And they asked the government to exclude subnational governments and public agencies, and also to have the negotiations regarding the Canada-EU Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement suspended until there can be a national consultation. The second petition is in regard to the changes to old age security benefits and eligibility for those. The concern is, of course, that OAS and GIS are very, very important to the financial welfare of Canadians, and to force Canadians to work 2 years longer deprives them of their ability to have a secure retirement. And so they ask the Government of Canada to maintain the retirement age for old age security at 65 and to make the required investments in guaranteed income supplement that would ensure that all Canadians are able to retire in dignity and keep them out of poverty.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to present a petition on CCSVI, particularly as on Tuesday, 52 Conservative senators voted en masse to block MS sufferers from testifying before a Senate committee on Bill S-204. I'm wondering if anyone can imagine cancer sufferers not being allowed to present at a committee studying cancer, and why did the government shut down the voice of Canadian MS patients? The petitioners call for the Minister of Health to undertake Phase 3 clinical trials on an urgent basis at multiple centres across Canada and to require follow-up care for Canadian MS patients.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Ottawa South.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to table petitions on behalf of my constituent, Janet Wilkinson, and the Grandmothers Advocacy Network. The petitions are signed by hundreds of local residents who are urging the government to pass Bill C-398 without significant amendment to facilitate the immediate and sustainable flow of life-saving generic medicines to developing countries. I am pleased to table these petitions this afternoon and look forward to the government's response. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's with pleasure I table a petition today with regards to the freshwater research station. These petitioners are asking that the government recognize the importance of the ELA to the Government of Canada's mandate to study, preserve, and protect the aquatic ecosystem, Mr. Speaker, and ultimately to reverse the cutbacks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present two petitions. The first is from residents of British Columbia and Ontario. I think it's particularly timely, given the reports that are coming out of the United States of the extensive use of robocalls to tell voters in various states that they can vote after the election is over on Wednesday. I think we need to get to the bottom of this. These petitioners ask that the Canadian Parliament launch an immediate public inquiry into the use of these calls in Canada. I think all parties around this House would like to make sure that any methods of voter suppression are eliminated from Canadian elections. The second petition, Mr. Speaker, is from residents of Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Quebec. They call upon this House to ensure that the investment treaty currently already signed between Canada and China not be ratified. There is no duty on the Prime Minister to ratify the treaty. The public is being clear. I know many Canadians are very concerned that we not ratify a treaty that binds Canada for up to 31 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, last but not least, the Honourable Member for Langley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to present a petition on discrimination against females. It highlights the fact that CBC aired an investigation on gender selection, revealing that ultrasound clinics were telling the sex of the unborn child, and often, if it was a girl, the pregnancy was terminated. Gender selection has been strongly condemned by all parties within this House. 92% of Canadians believe, Mr. Speaker, that sex selection pregnancy termination should be illegal. Along with the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they vehemently oppose this, calling upon this House to condemn, not endorse, this type of activity. Thank you.
Presenting petitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the following questions will be answered today. Q 902, 905, 909, 917, 931, and 935. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, if the following questions, number 903, 912, 941, and 951, could be made orders for returns, these returns would be tabled immediately.
Is it the pleasure of the House that questions number Q903, Q912, Q941, and Q951 be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the remaining questions be allowed to stand.
Agreed? Agreed. Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills, commons. Resuming debate of third reading of Bill C-28 of Financial Literacy Leader Act.
Reprise de débat.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Chambly-Bordouin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleagues for that warm welcome. In fact, it's quite interesting because despite the enthusiasm, financial literacy is not a subject that seems to be the most interesting right off the bat. That said, however, Mr. Speaker, it is nonetheless an extremely important subject, and it is one that is important just as much for young people who are starting their savings and who are starting to understand what investing means and what having money means, but it's also important for seniors who are retired and who have to manage, in fact, their pensions and their dollars and cents, which are more limited in their later years, given the fact that people have to retire, of course, well-deserved. So it is in this regard, with regard to C-28, that there was a study that was undertaken and seeks to create a financial literacy leader who would be responsible for the financial literacy of Canadians. In that regard, initially, we had opposed the bill for reasons that I will explain, but at third reading we will support it, also for reasons that I would like to explain. First of all, our position was maintained for a number of reasons. First, and not the least, is the fact that this is something that would not necessarily be a bilingual one. And we have seen, in fact, the excellent recent bill by my colleague from Louis Saint-Laurent, who does excellent work in this area. That said, when we talk about the bilingual abilities of these types of people, officers of parliament, usually this person isn't necessarily, but we're talking about an individual who has to deal with people from all linguistic communities, be it in Quebec and obviously where there is a strong concentration of peoples whose mother tongue is French, or be it in New Brunswick or throughout the rest of Ontario and so on across the country. And I think that when we talk about financial literacy, we have to be able to teach that literacy to individuals in their own language, the language of their choice, and that is both official languages. And this is a very important point. Now, we tried to introduce an amendment in committee to that end. Unfortunately, that amendment was rejected by the government. Nonetheless, we want to now support the bill because it's a good beginning, a good start. However, we would criticize the fact that this position should, in our opinion, be one that is bilingual, mandatorily bilingual. The second point that caused some concern within our party and concerned us a great deal is the fact that the position is being created, but then there was another recommendation being made by those individuals studying the question, and that is to create an advisor who would consult with the financial literacy leader and rather this board. It would be a board, and this board would be comprised of members from financial institutions, financial organizations, and agencies, and they would consult with the person who fills the position we're creating here, and therefore we would create a system where people from all sectors would be consulted with. And this is extremely important when we talk about financial literacy because, unfortunately, despite the important role of financial institutions, we have to be extremely careful, Mr. Speaker, when we teach people financial literacy, that we don't just do this in the interest of financial institutions. Rather, it is something that must take into consideration all realities, the realities of different segments of the population, the unions, the importance of pensions when we talk about financial institutions, of course, the importance of investments as well, when we talk about people who can educate the public. And I think it's extremely important to have board, and following a study in committee, we heard that this board shouldn't necessarily be put in place through a bill, but rather we have concerns about the political will that exists in this regard, and I think that this board should be created through the bill. Why wait? Why hope that this will be done later? I think that if we can put it in the bill and require it, we would have a leg up in this area. So I think we have serious concerns. We would like to have it. It's an important concern, but it's not enough to oppose the bill. I think that we have to take this good first step in the right direction and create this position in order to start with this education on financial matters. That is those are the reasons that we were opposed to the bill. But once again, Mr. Speaker, we have decided that this is a step in the right direction, so we're happy to support it now. However, we will continue to push for improvements in this file. With regard to this issue, Mr. Speaker, this summer we talked about financial literacy and Bill C-28, and I cannot let this opportunity go by without talking about how this bill would impact people in my riding. There's someone in my riding who works for a financial institution, and this person has even become a very good friend, someone with whom I've often had the opportunity to talk. It's a Director General of the Desjardins Caisse in my riding. And when I had a dinner with this person one night in my riding, I had the opportunity to discuss with them the various issues that people face concerning their retirement funds, their pension, their major problems that we have, and one of them is debt. Many people are getting deeper and deeper into debt, and I think that it's not necessarily the fault of the individual themselves, but rather the fact that they have trouble with financial literacy. And I am not trying to blame citizens here. I think that these days there are so many opportunities to invest, so many opportunities to take part in pension plans and to have credit cards with all the expenditures that may involve. And the cost of living is rising and so forth. And so therefore it can be easy to get into debt, and the level of debt has become a very serious problem.
And as you said, Mr. Speaker, I've had an opportunity to talk about these issues. I spoke to Mr. Rémy, who talked about it. Now, in a riding like mine, there's a great deal of hidden poverty. We're in the suburbs. There are some beautiful homes. Sometimes people have 2 or 3 cars on the driveway, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not indebted, that they don't face poverty as well. So as members of Parliament, we represent all of these people, and that's why it's so important to promote financial literacy. It's a value that I share with my colleagues, and that's why we'll be supporting this good first step. We need to continue, however, to improve measures that are in place. Now, another story I'd like to tell you, Mr. Speaker, with respect to financial literacy is this. Now, in Chambly, every year we have the Seniors Fair, and it's very interesting. It's a very important event for the community. The organizations that serve seniors and offer services get together, and members of Parliament sitting here and in Quebec City as well, members from Ottawa, can set up tables, kiosks, to hand out pamphlets, brochures, and there are presentations made by a number of the community stakeholders. Last year, when I attended the event for the first time, I went back again this year, but last year one of the presentations that was made was extremely interesting, and it dealt specifically with financial literacy. As I said when I began my remarks, it was about pensions, ensuring that people manage their pension funding, their RRSPs, the financial resources that they have, that people have worked so hard to earn over their lifetime. So it was a very worthwhile activity for our seniors, and I think we need to promote financial literacy and to improve the lot in life of our seniors, to give them the tools they need and the education they need. I think it's a very laudable objective. Once again, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about these issues, it helps us to explain the situation. When we talk about financial literacy, we can often get caught up in a trap, thinking that we're blaming people, saying that they're not educated enough, they can't manage their money. But I can't emphasize this fact enough, Mr. Speaker. That's not the issue we're facing. People feel that they're overwhelmed by the number of options that exist out there. And oftentimes the same is true for seniors. They'll get calls at home for offering them services, and in passing, many times, they're fraudulent calls that come in, and that's another issue. That's another problem that makes it even more important to support this government bill, because we need to have penalties for people who are taking advantage of seniors like that. There are a number of new measures, Mr. Speaker, that exist that enable people to retire comfortably, quite comfortably, and that is of the utmost importance for seniors, that they can rely on someone, trust them, and the position that will be created when the bill goes through. Now, the same kind of concerns apply to young people. I've talked about seniors, but young people who are starting to learn about what having an income is like, they're working at a job, and I think we've all gone through this, Mr. Speaker. We end up at a place, at a time in our life where we have disposable income for the first time, and often we want to know how we should spend it, to have some fun if we can, but also make some wise, responsible decisions. I reiterate again, but this is so important, Mr. Speaker. I'm not saying that people aren't in a position to do so, but when young people are very young and they're being offered credit cards, we need to take the time to explain to them how important it is to invest in an RRSP, to look at how that money will build up and to build for their retirement. And they need support through the various agencies and with the creation of the position in the bill, with this mandate to promote financial literacy. Now, I've been speaking to this issue for a few moments now, Mr. Speaker, but it makes me realize that financial literacy can mean different things to different people. I think that you can see through my speech that it applies to people of all ages. So we would prefer, in fact, to have a clearer decision of financial literacy. And when we talk about creating a position to promote awareness and better financial literacy, it's like the definition of the famous net benefit for Canada. We need a good definition of that. So here, too, we need a clear definition. So we have a leader in the position who can manage the files. There need to be some clarifications made to the definition. This lack of clear definition, Mr. Speaker, is one of the reasons why we opposed the bill. However, we think that the benefits of this bill outweigh its shortcomings. We can subsequently obtain better clarification over the next few months, over the months and years to come as this process unfolds. We'll need to focus on this concern that we've raised today with respect to a clearer definition. Now, as regards our change of position on the bill, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to explain the other reason we reached the conclusion we did, and it's because of the work that was done in committee. Our critic for consumer protection who identified these issues, who did such a great job on the matter, on the issue. What he explained to us in great detail was that when at committee they had an opportunity to look at the bill, witnesses came in and called for what we are calling for in the NDP. They raised their concerns, the points that I raised in my remarks, Mr. Speaker. But I think that when we take a look at the work that was done in committee, the witnesses succeeded in clearly explaining to all committee members the importance of moving forward with this first step. Having heard that at committee, it wouldn't be right for us not to support this bill, the first steps that it contains. However, we do have some concerns, as I've already addressed, Mr. Speaker. This is a good opportunity to talk about the importance of work in committee and of hearing witnesses, expert witnesses on the issues, and to hear from witnesses who come from all different backgrounds. When we look at the witnesses who appeared, you can see that there were people from all areas, all walks of life, economists, people who were from financial institutions, from unions, and all of those people sat down together and had a serious discussion about this issue that affects us all. Without focusing on one aspect over another, it gave us a good, clear overview for the benefit of all. And when we talk about the interest for everyone, that's another important aspect. Last fall, or a year ago in the spring, we debated a bill, and I can't remember what number it was, but it was a bill designed to set up another retirement savings plan that closely resembled our RSPs. And when we spoke to that bill, we raised a number of concerns with respect to the retirement plans, because we don't want to fall into the trap that we've seen in the past. People who've seen the company they worked for declare bankruptcy and they lose their pensions. People who've worked so hard for so long to be affected that way because the company they worked for isn't managing or hasn't managed its business. And we've seen that in the United States. We saw it in 2008 in the United States during the recession. That's what happened. And I think that that makes financial literacy even more important, because it allows us to get a debate underway, a discussion on retirement funds, on investing and workers, regardless of what field they're from. They can recognize the dangers, the risks, and to proceed carefully. Over the years we work, invest in pensions, invest in savings, but if you end up losing all of that because of poor decisions made by the people leading the companies that we've worked for, well, that's a huge problem, and that's why we want to be very careful. It's very important to educate citizens and to give them all of the tools they need in order to make sound decisions for their retirement and their investments. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to talk about my own experience in this regard. As I said earlier, when young people start working at a certain age, earn some money, we have opportunities, retirement may seem far off, far down the road. And when you're in your 20s, you don't necessarily think about retirement. But I think that it is very important to do so. I often say, talk about the importance of this, because pensions are important for seniors, people who are on the verge of retirement, but also for young people. We have to acknowledge that. We can't get caught up in saying no, it affects one category of citizens, not others, seniors, not young people. I know that my time is up, Mr. Speaker, but this is such an important issue, and that is why we'll be supporting the bill. It's also why we'll continue to work on these measures so that citizens can invest their money and have the financial security that they need, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Question and comment.
Questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question to the member is in looking at financial literacy, it's great to see that the federal government has actually taken an interest to the degree in which they've introduced a bill which will, in good part, at least move us a little bit forward. There's a lot more that they could be doing, but part of the responsibility is also to work with the different provinces. The provincial governments play a huge role in this whole issue of financial literacy, and you could ultimately even pass that down into places like our school divisions. And my question to the member is, does he see the important role that the minister, in particular other ministers, specifically the minister responsible for intergovernmental relations, in terms of taking this important file and advancing it with all provinces in Canada?
The Honourable Member for Chambly-Borduas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question, because he is absolutely right. On this kind of issue, we need to work closely with the provinces, because they too have various systems in place which are part of the investment system for retirement. And in Quebec, for example, where I'm from, we have our own system, the QPP, and that again shows why there needs to be work done with the provinces. I'm sad to have to comment on the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. He's asked a question about that. Unfortunately, I think the Minister isn't in a position to fulfill his mandate at present, but that's another kettle of fish, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, he also talked about schools, and he's absolutely right there as well. I talked about the importance of educating young people who enter the workforce, and that's why, Mr. Speaker, it's so important to have an advisory group made up of all people from all different fields, not just financial institutions, despite the important role they have to play. We need to have a balanced approach with other representatives as well to reflect reality. Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Drummond. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate my colleague for Chambly-Borduas on his excellent speech. It's an issue that can be difficult to explain. He's given us some concrete examples through the work he's done in his constituency. He's explained the importance of this legislation. I come from an auditing background, and I know it's very important to get information out, make it available, so that people can make the best decisions possible, be it, as my colleague mentioned, for seniors, for young people, people on the verge of retirement, or to deal with high debt loads due to credit cards with exorbitant rates. Now, my colleague also talked about excellent work being done in a committee. We know that with C-45, for example, we should have had an opportunity to more closely examine the in-depth changes being made in various committees, independently, autonomously, and not simply have to depend on the Finance Committee. But all that to say, I'd like to congratulate my colleague and ask him this question. How does he see this bill improving education so that we can improve the people of Canada's knowledge of financial issues? The Honourable Member for Chambly-Borduas. Well, I thank my colleague for his question. I was very happy to see that in committee we could work and develop our position after hearing from experts. That is the real raison d'être for committees. It was good to see. Now, on our support for this bill and to answer whether or not it's a good bill, like I said, it's a step in the right direction, but a great deal of work remains. It's like the bill we debated this morning, the C-44. We can't confuse our support. Our support doesn't mean that we're satisfied with where we're at. We don't think that there's any further work that needs to be done. There are some clarifications that need to be made there, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to thank my colleague for having brought his perspective to the issue. We need to respect people's intelligence, their responsibilities, their ability to invest when we're attempting to educate them. And as I said, we can't get caught up in a trap and just talk about savings. We have to help people to understand the reality of financial institutions so that they can get returns on their investments, but also have safe investments. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his remarks. In the NDP, as you know, we've always promoted dealing with poverty in Canada. I'd like to hear my colleagues' comments on what I'm going to say. It seems to me that people who are better informed of the financial issues and situation, who have clear information, this information can help reduce poverty because people are better informed. They know what their rights are. They have a better understanding of finances in general. The Honourable Member for Chambly-Bourgeois. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his question because that is precisely why we feel that there's a great deal of work that needs to be done. That type of awareness or education that a government can do, that an MP can do with other groups to help people overcome poverty, to maximize their resources, and bearing that in mind, with that objective in mind, in fact, we can help overcome poverty, as we've tried to do in the NDP. And that's why we need to continue to work on this issue. We need to continue to clarify the definition surrounding financial literacy. We need better understanding of the position, the responsibilities of the person in the position that will be created.
And to come back to what I was saying in my speech regarding personal debt, often those who are in personal debt don't understand the problem, but this is part of the problem of poverty, especially in my riding. It's a very dangerous path to follow. It's a slippery slope. Once you incur personal debt, it can exacerbate poverty. So I think we can do our part to help people reduce their personal debt loads. It won't happen overnight, but by educating people, we can do our part to solve this problem, which is more widespread in our society, and it is a huge problem. Questions and comments? Resuming debate.
For Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with pleasure that I stand to rise to speak to Bill C-28 today. In fact, right offhand, there's a couple of what I believe good reasons to be able to stand in my place and speak in favor of the bill. Number one, it is a step forward, and we acknowledge that within the Liberal Party, that it is a step forward. We did have concerns during the second reading. Many of those concerns were addressed going through the committee stage, and we're pleased with the responses and that we, in essence, had heard through committee stage and some of the other discussions that had taken place since the second reading, which ultimately brings us to where we are today. So, in that sense, we do recognize that this is a bill that does take us forward. Now, the other thing that I like about this particular bill is it also, Mr. Speaker, points out the difference, I guess, in good part between the government and the Liberal Party. On the one hand, the Conservatives have, yes, recognized that there is a need to deal with the issue. But on the other hand, they're not coming in with any sort of a comprehensive plan. They didn't really show any meetings of stakeholders that had taken place prior to this bill even coming to the House in first reading, I would suggest, Mr. Speaker. So it's almost as if they had an idea, or someone from within had an idea. They kind of kept it to themselves, and then they brought in the bill. We believe within the Liberal Party that the bill could have been so much better, and had the government actually done some consultation with different stakeholders, that what we would be looking at today, I believe, is a much more detailed plan as to where we should be going, Mr. Speaker. Financial literacy is very important, and the education, Mr. Speaker, is of critical nature. What you have to look at when you think of education is that it goes beyond the House of Commons passing Bill C-28. And that's why I make reference to the stakeholders. You see, there was a time in which I was, and I might have even made reference to this in the past, the education critic in the province of Manitoba. And there was a great deal of battles that take place within education in regards to what should be a part of the curriculum and what should not be a part of the curriculum. People want to emphasize the importance, for example, of language arts and mathematics, and justifiably so, Mr. Speaker. We want our students, when they're graduating from high school, to have a basic understanding of the language arts and mathematics and a number of other areas. And what we're suggesting is that at the end of the day, financial literacy is critically important. So when you look at it in terms of how it is that we're going to disseminate that information, it is a huge mistake for us not to take into consideration the important role that other stakeholders have to play. And that's the reason why I bring up the whole area of education. So when we talk about leadership, and we want leadership from the government in terms of dealing with this very important issue, what we're hoping to see is not just legislation that comes before the House, Mr. Speaker. What we want to be able to see is a government that is actively promoting and encouraging dialogue in regards to the different stakeholders. And that's why, I had posed my question in regards to the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, Mr. Speaker, because it is somewhat time-sensitive. It's an interesting issue. We brought it up today in question period. And you ask yourself, to what degree does that particular minister have a responsibility now to take this legislation that is going to pass? It would appear as if it has the support of all members of the House, Mr. Speaker. I suspect, I don't know for sure. We'll find out when the bill is actually voted on. But what do we do after we've passed the legislation, Mr. Speaker? What is the next step? I understand, and I appreciate the primary purpose of this legislation is to create a financial literacy leader. That's great, Mr. Speaker. But along with that, we need to recognize the importance of education and reaching into the different stakeholders. So it's not just good enough to say, well, here's the idea, let's put it into the House and then have the House vote on it and then leave it at that. No, there's a responsibility for individuals like the minister responsible for intergovernmental affairs to go out and meet with different representatives of government, different levels of government, and say, here's what's happening in the House, and here's the type of thing in which we think we could be moving forward on. What do you think? As a provincial entity, we need to recognize that there's different departments. In a provincial jurisdiction, you will have Department of Consumer Affairs,
Consumer and Corporate Affairs. You will have departments of education. There will be other departments that one might want to consider. There's even maybe different departments within the national government itself that would have a vested interest in this whole subject matter, Mr. Speaker. I've made reference to school divisions. Even our municipalities, whether they're the larger municipalities of cities, large cities, or small rural municipalities, Mr. Speaker. They all have a vested interest, even in terms of distributing of information such as tax rolls and so forth, and understanding how a tax and what a tax roll is, and the obligations to pay a property tax, and how that is done through automatic banking if one chooses. There's all sorts of reasons why all these different government agencies have a vested interest, Mr. Speaker. But I'll suggest to you that we need to go even beyond that. You have to take a look at the private sector in the important role that the private sector has to play. It's not just the banking industry or our top banks. You'll find some of the most progressive policy today regarding finances and consumer awareness is actually coming from our credit unions, from our co-ops. Those are agencies, Mr. Speaker, or private companies or corporations that have seen the merit in terms of consumer awareness or financial literacy. So the private sector obviously has a very critical role to play in this, Mr. Speaker. And we need to encourage that ongoing support. So whether you're government, nonprofit, and I didn't make reference to nonprofit, but obviously nonprofit also has a role to play. I remember meeting with representatives from Winnipeg Harvest, which is the largest food distribution center for people that just don't have the ability to pay for their own for all of their food, so they're having to go to Winnipeg Harvest. And I've talked to representatives from Winnipeg Harvest on the issue of finances. Nonprofit organizations have a great talent pool that's there, social planning councils. So whether it's government, nonprofit agencies, or private sector, all have a role to play in regards to financial literacy. And I would suggest to you that there is only one real authority that has the most significant role to play, and that role is of leadership. And that is, of course, here within the House of Commons. We need to see a government that is committed to do more than just bring in Bill C-28, which creates a financial literacy leader. We need to ensure that there's a lot more than just that, Mr. Speaker. But it's good, and we recognize, as I say, that the government has, in fact, brought this bill before us today. And that's the reason why, in third reading, we will be supporting the bill, because we do see it as a move forward, and we do believe, at the end of the day, that it will add to the importance of education on a very important issue, Mr. Speaker. But we don't want the government to sit back and say that they've done enough, because there is a lot more that needs to be done in this area. Things have changed dramatically. That wasn't that long ago, Mr. Speaker, as a teenager, you go and you open up a bank account. And you do that by going down to the bank. You provide maybe a couple pieces of ID. You might even got away with one piece of ID when I was a teenager back then, Mr. Speaker. And, you set up your bank and you want to take out money or deposit money. You go to the bank. It was pretty simple. Loans, credit cards, even though I was a little bit more challenged at that early age to be able to get a credit card. But point is, you go to the bank. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, they have this phone banking system in which you could go onto the telephone and you could actually do some transactions. Actually, even prior to that, you could even make these automatic deposits and withdrawals, so you could pay bills on a monthly basis. It would just kind of like go out of your account. Then they came up with the phoning, where you could actually phone a line and register with the places you're going to be paying your bills at, and you can make payments through the telephone. Well, now, Mr. Speaker, it's through the website, and a vast majority now do their banking online. And, Mr. Speaker, and I should be careful when I say a vast majority because I don't know that for fact. It might not necessarily be the case. I suspect that as we continue to move forward in time, that we will get a good, solid majority of people doing their banking services online. I know that there are many people today that refuse to use the technology, and sometimes for a very good reason, and they choose to be able to have that face-to-face connection with the teller, or to be able to take the walk over to the bank. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, is that things are changing, and things are changing relatively rapidly. And we need to recognize that change. And with that change, all sorts of other issues arise. Credit cards and the amount of money that is paid in terms of interest, service charges on credit cards. You give a 19-year-old a credit card, or even a 40-year-old a credit card, especially at this time of the year, when consumer spending is expected to significantly increase in the months of November and December. Those credit cards are very attractive little pieces of plastic. And it doesn't take too much to accrue a significant amount of money on that little piece of plastic. Well, you go around to all these stores and you're seeing more and more of them all the time, Mr. Speaker, and they call them gift cards nowadays. A lot of people will go and they'll purchase gift cards as a gift, as a Christmas gift, or as a holiday gift, Mr. Speaker. Well, many of these gift cards will expire. They'll have a short period of time before they expire. Many of the consumers purchasing those little gift cards are not necessarily aware of that. Well, these are the types of things that really do have an impact. And why it's so very important that we recognize that education is of critical importance in terms of making sure that whether you're 16 years old in a high school or you're 30 years old working on a factory floor or working in a professional office, whatever it might be, that there needs to be some sense of an advocate that's out there talking about what is happening and what consumers can do in order to be able to protect themselves, to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that there is someone on the consumer side ensuring that there are rights and that they're not being taken advantage of or exploited. Ultimately, I believe it was back in 2001 when we actually saw the creation of the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, which I thought was a great initiative that former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien had and his government. And it was, I believe, a direct response as to what was happening in the real world. We recognized back then, and you'll even recall, Mr. Speaker, that's when those gift cards were really coming out big time back then, and there was very little consumer knowledge about the gift cards back then. But at least, the government back in 2001 recognized the importance of consumer education, and they created that agency. And, you could go to their website. There's a great deal that can be learned through that website, Mr. Speaker. I've encouraged constituents to be able to visit that website. A lot can be learned by it. In fact, we recognize that the government has seen the merit, and it's proven itself because it's now stood the test of time where you have a change in government, where you had the Liberals bring it in and the Conservatives have now been in for a number of years, and they've recognized the value of this agency, Mr. Speaker, because ultimately the legislation that we have today, Bill C-28, which creates the financial literacy leader, well, that person is going to be reporting to the Commissioner of the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. So we have seen, the government of Canada today, under the Conservative banner, recognizing that what Jean Chrétien and the Liberals created back in 2001 was indeed a good idea. And you'll find that governments of different levels have gotten on board in regards to that particular agency. So by tying the literacy leader, or that individual, he or she, whoever that might be going forward, Mr. Speaker, to this agency, I believe is a good thing and gives more credibility to the financial literacy leader and the office that will no doubt will follow. Mr. Speaker, I know that Canadians are very much concerned about debt and the overall debt that Canadians have today. We should be concerned. It was the Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, raised the issue in terms of just how much debt there really is. The number that I've heard is $1.63 for every dollar of annual income. Mr. Speaker, that is significant. That is a record high. From what I understand, Mr. Speaker, and the Bank of Canada, the Governor has highlighted this point, that this is a record high of consumer debt. Now, the government does have to take some responsibility for that record. And I don't say that lightly. It was this particular Minister of Finance that introduced the 1 minute to go. How quickly time flies, Mr. Speaker. It was this particular Minister of Finance that brought in the 40-year mortgage. And that 40-year mortgage didn't even require the minimum down payment. Now, given they've learned their lesson, and they're trying now to, they're bringing it back to the 25 years, but that contributed to the overall debt ratio that Canadians have today. The bottom line, Mr. Speaker, is the government does play a role. Financial literacy is important. We've recognized that within the Liberal Party. We are supporting the bill because it does move us forward. Not very much, but it does move us forward. Therefore, we are prepared to support it in third reading. But we also encourage the government that it can do so much more. And if they want some good ideas, they can always turn to the opposition members, in particular members in the Liberal Party. We'll be more than happy to share the ideas that we have, Mr. Speaker, because we do recognize just how important it is that we talk about the education of financial literacy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Charlottetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague from Winnipeg North for his excellent speech. I want to pick up on the very last point that he made with regards to the debt levels in this country, the level of household debt. There is no question that there has been a ballooning in the levels of household debt in this country, and that the level of household debt is one of the reasons that undoubtedly prompted the government to say there's a need for greater financial literacy. What's ironic is that the levels of household debt were caused in part by the decision of this government to introduce 40-year mortgages with no down payments. So the last point that my honourable colleague made was that the appointment of a financial literacy officer is a good first step. Given that this situation that we're in isn't one that's entirely separate from the policies of this government, what measures would my honourable colleague propose? Because there's more that we could be doing. Could he go through some of the measures that we could be undertaking over and above the appointment of a financial literacy officer? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, I thank my colleague for the question. I think the most important thing that the government can do is actually start looking at having a ministerial meeting on the issue of financial literacy. There is an obligation for the government not only to recognize an issue, but to actually then consult with people, different organizations, whether it's the government or private sector, and see how we can take a more collective approach at ensuring we're maximizing the amount of financial literacy programming that can be done, so that we're not only going to be educating people in, let's say, schools, but there's also potential within the working environment. So whether you're, as I say, 40 years old or 16 years old, that there's an environment where there is some sort of financial literacy that's being taught. And hopefully, you know, the financial literacy leader that this legislation is creating will take a look at those types of initiatives that would encourage that. When the member makes reference, because, Mr. Speaker, I did kind of run out of time, I made reference to the $1.63 of debt for every dollar annually that a person has. That's very close to what it was for the Americans at the time in which they had the huge housing crisis, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm not trying to raise a red flag unnecessarily, but I would suggest that people should take note that it was the Governor of the Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, that actually did raise the issue. So we should be listening and taking appropriate actions, especially on government policy.
Questions, questions and comments?
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to ask a question on this subject once again. You know, good work was done in committee. I wasn't there, but I had heard a bit about it, and there were 6 amendments proposed, Liberal 0, the Conservative 0, but one of the amendments we proposed was to set out in the Act that this person who would have this position should be bilingual, and we saw it with the Auditor General of Canada. This was a unilingual Anglophone Auditor General, and I think he's undertaken to learn the second official language, but I wasn't on the committee. Did the Liberals support that amendment to set out in the bill that this person should be bilingual?
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do believe that if we were to take a look in terms of what the Liberal Party has done in regards to the Auditor General and made a very strong statement on the Auditor General, I would suggest to you that second to no other statement saying that in positions of this nature that it is a mistake not to have someone that is bilingual. I'm hopeful that the government has learned a lesson on that particular issue, and we'll have to wait and see in terms of what it is that they do. In regards to the amendments, I can tell the member, that the Liberal Party does approach committees after bills pass out a second reading. We do approach committees very seriously. We listen to what people have to say. And in some bills, amendments are moved. Some bills, amendments are not moved. When they had the first omnibus bill, the Liberals introduced over 400 bills inside the House on the third reading. The NDP did 0.
it fluctuates. Sometimes we do move amendments, depends on the critics. A lot depends in terms of what other amendments are in fact being moved. Sometimes an amendment that's being moved by one opposition party has the support from the other opposition party. The idea here is that if there's a good idea and we feel that it would make the bill better, we would in fact support the amendment. And it's unfortunate that maybe that the government didn't make some of the changes that some of his colleagues would have suggested. I suspect that we might have even voted for some of those amendments that the members suggested. At the end of the day, and I acknowledged at the very beginning, this bill is just but a small step in an area in which we need to make some fairly significant size steps. Thank you for that.
Time for one more short question. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very quickly, the Honourable Member indicated that a key part to increasing financial literacy is going to be cooperation between the provinces. When we look at the record of this government in terms of dealing with the provinces, we have a Prime Minister who won't meet with the provincial ministers as a group. We have an intergovernmental affairs minister who does all his work either in Ottawa or in Labrador. We have a finance minister who says to the provinces, there's what you're getting for health care. That's our idea of federal-provincial cooperation. We have changes to the old age security that's going to increase the welfare rolls in the provinces, changes in EI that are going to increase the welfare rolls in the provinces, changes in crime legislation that's going to increase costs in the provinces. Given the state of federal-provincial relations in this country, could the member explain his level of optimism that this will achieve its objective, given the necessary working together between the provincial and federal levels of government to get it done?
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North is less than a minute.
Less than a minute. That could be tough. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that, I started off my speech by saying, one of the things I like about this bill is it does show a difference between the Conservatives and the Liberal Party of Canada. The Liberal Party of Canada believes in order to really adequately deal with financial literacy in our country that we need to be able to work with the provinces and the different stakeholders, including school divisions and so forth, the private sector, in order to be able to get the job done and get the job done right. That means you're going to have ministers that actually do go out and meet with their provincial counterparts, the Prime Minister having a First Ministers meeting, and so forth. Great question, and I hope I was able to answer it adequately. Thank you.
I regret having to interrupt the Honourable Member from Winnipeg North at this time, but it being 1:30 p.m., the House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members' business, consideration at report stage of Bill 370, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act, St. Lawrence Islands National Park of Canada, standing in the name of Mr. Brown, Leeds Granville.
There being no motions at report stage, the House will now proceed without debate to the putting of the question on the motion to concur in the bill at report stage. Mr. Brown, Leeds Grenville, seconded by Mr. Bazan, moves that Bill C-370, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act, St. Lawrence Islands National Park of Canada, be concurred in at report stage. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yeah. All those in favour will please say yea. Yay. All those opposed will please say nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the recorded division stands deferred until Wednesday, November 21st, 2012, immediately before the time provided for private members' business. It being 1:31 p.m., pursuant to an order made Tuesday, September 25th, 2012, the House stands adjourned until Monday, November 19th, 2012, at 11 a.m., pursuant to Standing Order 28.2 and 24.1.